What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Gentlemen of the Corax. Today, we should probably find another name at this point now that we have more female guests. But
The
anyways,
the gentry of the Corax.
tentatively we'll keep the name. But anyways, we have a cool episode today. We're going to be talking about extant, so modern, charismatic megafauna. So megafauna is basically anything over a certain size range. We are very loose with this terminology, as you'll see. But overall, just think, big animals. And charismatic, these are the things that people, care about, like maybe not scientists, but just like your regular old people. They would know about these, even if they don't know much about animals in general, they'll, be able to recognize these at like a zoo per se. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. We have a list from all different um, environments. We have a list of things from different ton of different adaptations, ton of different groups phylogenetically. So yeah, it's going to be a fun list. When you guys think of charismatic megafauna, what do you guys usually think about?
Well, when I hear megafauna, I think of specifically the very large animals that were alive kind of globally during the last ice age. But megafauna really is a term that can apply to any animal that's, I mean, depending on your definition, any large animal bigger than a person, bigger than 200 pounds, etc.
My brain immediately goes to stuff like elephants and whales and all that kind of stuff. So anything that you would think of that's the biggest of that thing. But that's just, the common answer to everything. You think of that, that's the number one answer, the biggest one.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things too that I researched when I was making this list of animals was what people actually think about and what they relate to when they think of animals. So like the big things that I've noticed as far as trends is like you would see in the extinct charismatic animals, people always focus on dinosaurs. It seems like with modern animals it's all about terrestrial mammals. It seems like that is what people are interested in. It doesn't matter if it's a herbivore or a carnivore, but people love the terrestrial mammals. And that's cool and all, but I feel like it really doesn't paint a good picture of the diversity of life on Earth because you have all these different really unique and really cool groups that just, I guess, the mass media doesn't really focus on. Um, Advertising and things like that, they don't really get the light of day. So yeah, it has a couple different implications, both good and bad to me. So on the positive side, these animals they get people interested in biology, zoology, things like that of that nature. But at the same time, with so much focus on it, it can get kind of fatiguing when you're watching all these nature documentaries and everything is just within like the savannas of Africa with the exact same faunas, the exact same plots. It's like there's so much other cool things that don't really get the time of day. And then when you look at it from the research side of things, all of the funding tends to go to the few things that that the mass media is really interested in. And then you get very little attention or funding for other smaller things, things that are weird that people don't really know of.
Yeah, one thing that really got me interested in animals and like in the first place when I started gaining that interest as a kid, it actually came a lot from like visiting the zoo and you see something that like everybody knows but is still awesome, like a lion, a tiger, a bear. Um, and it made me want to learn. It made me want to figure out how I could participate in conservation efforts or just at least educate myself on stuff. Um, and part of the reason why I now work at the Phoenix Zoo, I just work with the park rangers, so I'm not with animals, but I still get to see them all the time, and I'm always learning something new. And I get to talk to the zookeepers a lot there, and learn more about their conservation projects and a bunch of different programs that they have, like the SAFE program. Um, and it's just really nice to be in like an AZA accredited place um, that really just pulls so many people in every day. Every day of the year, there's thousands of people at the zoo, and they're all like having fun and learning something. And then they go home, they're like, oh, I didn't know that about hippos or whatever they, end up learning. It's just always a fun experience.
Yeah. And it does go both ways with conservation. So when we think of these animals and it gets people really interested, and then that does help with conservation efforts. But at the same time, with all of this mass media portrayal of some of these animals, it sometimes makes people not really understand how endangered some of them are.
Hmm.
So when you see like tigers everywhere on like your Frosty Flakes, for example, or wherever you see this, you don't really think of them as these really, threatened animals. Yet at the same time, when you're actually in those environments, it's a very different story for them.
There are probably more depictions of tigers in art and media than there are actual Siberian tigers in the wild today.
I'm willing to bet that's more than true.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and the endangered species kind of role in like I doubt people would care as much about an endangered species list if there weren't iconic animals like tigers, pandas, etc. on the list. But the existence of the list itself has let us protect a large amount of wildlife that people wouldn't care about usually. I just got back from Death Valley, and a Death Valley is it's the largest park in the lower 48, but it's got an annex, which is just a little hole or a piece of land, a square piece of land, maybe the size of the room that I'm in, around Devil's Hole, which is home to one of the rare species of fish in the world. And let that spot specifically has federal protection, not just state protection, for the endangered Devil's Hole pupfish. Um, but that single fish species led to the creation of this kind of wildlife conservation area that
Hmm.
would not exist without a kind of a deep respect that we have in our culture for endangered species, and that comes from how we look at things like an elephant or a uh, panda, koala, etc.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like other animals that have that wow factor about them that can grab more people's attention versus
Mhm.
something that's a little less known.
Right.
Yeah. And before we get into the list itself, we'll just set some ground rules real quick. So we have a tier list that we're going to be ranking these animals on. We have 7 tiers, and the trick is that we're going to be limiting it to 6 animals per tier list. So that means that some things might be contested, some things we might have to interchange, like move around, but I think it'll keep it interesting. So without further ado, I say that we get started on that. So our first animal on our tier list, is going to be the American alligator. What do we think about these?
Well, right off the bat, I have a couple of fun facts, just to like get a good grasp of what an American alligator really is, just from a physical standpoint. They can weigh 500 to 600 pounds. They are 10 to 15 feet long. Females usually a little smaller than the males. They have a bite force of 2,000 to 3,000 pounds per square inch, which is insane. They can live up to like 50 years in the wild and over 70 in captivity. And they're typically freshwater, but they can get truly massive.
Yeah, highly successful and prolific animals that have weathered the developing of North America far better than most, especially for a reptile.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, there's alligator fossils basically throughout the entire Cenozoic, throughout much of North America. There's ones from South Dakota, Nebraska, Tennessee, a consistent record going back almost 30 million years. Then you have extinct alligator species taking that back even further.
Right. Yeah, alligatoroids like the iconic Deinosuchus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they go back before the extinction of the dinosaurs.
Mhm.
Yeah. And weren't these also at one point very critically endangered, and then they wound up having a really big comeback story, and now they're much better off. I think they're least concern right now, right?
Yeah, so they're actually one of the few cases of megafauna conservation success stories out there that they were basically on the verge of extinction and then habitat protection, captive breeding, basically restored the numbers to the point that they're farmed now for meat in a lot of places in North America.
Wow.
Hmm.
And plus, they're cute. They look like swamp puppies.
Oh yeah.
We
Yeah,
like
they're dispositionally they're pretty docile if, in terms of like a giant semi-aquatic as far as giant semi-aquatic predators go, uh, especially compared to some of their crocodilian kin.
Yeah. And
Given how many,
these are really a cultural icon within Florida too,
mhm.
especially.
And Louisiana,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like one of the first things you think when you think like Florida man headlines, you think of like people running around with alligators.
There's
Yeah,
always
I
some
think
story going on with them.
yeah. I think
Swimming
that
pool.
these are definitely something that we can place high up on the list. I wouldn't go S tier on them, but
confidently.
I would think that these would be like a solid B tier.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm thinking A for alligator, dude.
A.
At the very least, an honorable mention.
Yep. America's largest reptile.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Conservation success story.
What do you think,
Prehistoric.
Russell?
I think A is fine.
A?
Yeah.
Start off strong.
I I think I think I can settle for that. All right. So our next one on the list is the American bison.
American bison are pretty cool too. Do you want me to rattle off some of my facts for them?
Go for it.
All right, they can weigh up to 1,000 to 2,000 pounds. They are the largest land mammal in the United States. They can stand at over 6 feet tall for the males, especially. Females a little smaller. They can actually run faster than the average horse at 35 to 40 miles per hour. They can live up to 25 years. They have 4 stomachs, like how cows do. Um, and there are only about 31,000 in the wild at the moment.
Yeah, and these used to be abundant until fairly recently within I guess American history or prehistory, however we want to say it.
Yeah, the American bison historical range is insane. Like as far east as like the east, like I think American bison historical range.
I mean,
Yeah, as
there's
far east as Virginia and Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
What are you gonna say, Russell?
oh yeah, there's so a lot of the Native American civilizations, especially the Mississippians, would actually engage in ecosystem engineering to make more favorable habitat for bison further east, to basically encourage them to, you know, to encourage the increase of their numbers further east to provide a bigger food source. That's part of the reason why there's just, so records of them going all the way to Virginia. Like you wouldn't
That's
think of
crazy.
a yeah, because you can't really domesticate them. They're a little bit too aggressive for people without modern technology to really keep in pens. Large bovids in general, just they don't domesticate well. They often are very temperamental animals. It's a miracle that even the cow is domesticated.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I have seen a lot of videos of really dumb people who will go out, see a bison, and think, "Oh, cool, I'm gonna go take a picture," and then they'll just get charged. And I'm like,
Yep.
"Yeah,
Oh yeah,
I could watch videos of bison flipping tourists all day.
they
yeah."
used to have a video of that at the Yellowstone National Park visitor center, basically saying, "Do not do this, or this will happen to you." And they had pictures of even bison running around, galloping, kicking at the parking lot of the visitor center itself.
Yeah.
Like they didn't care. The bison were doing what they wanted.
Yeah.
And with how fast they can run and how strong they are, that they're able to like flip cars over, you do not want to get in their way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're really an icon of the American West.
Hmm.
But it is really interesting knowing that they spanned much further than what we tend to think of them as way
Yeah,
back until not so far back.
and they really are animals that evolved for the Ice Age that have just kind of happened to do well in a more temperate climate that we've got today.
Well, part of the reason they did so too is all their competition's gone. I
Right.
mean, the reason that the bison herds got so huge in the Holocene is basically all their competition was wiped out in the Pleistocene. There's no horses around in North America anymore until the Mustangs are brought over. The elephants are all gone. So it's basically the bisons just had the plains to
Yep.
themselves. They could
Camel's
just,
gone.
yeah, just their numbers could just balloon like crazy.
Hmm.
Definitely. And I think that's because they can subsist on these like big giant grassland prairies, whereas they don't need that kind of like nutrient dense ice age type ecosystem like the mammoth steppe
Right.
or
Yeah.
the kind of the dry transitional woodland environments that like the Columbian mammoths would have inhabited.
Yeah. So what are we thinking for tier rating on these? I think that they're cool, but I think as far as charismatic animals, it's fairly niche what people when people think about bisons. I think it's mostly limited to some of like the American West where they really hold these things dearly. And
Yeah.
they're really cool, but at the same time I wouldn't put them super high.
Yeah, B
There
for bison.
yeah, there are
B?
European bison, but like people don't think much about them at all.
Yeah.
Right. There's another subspecies of bison in America, the wood bison, that mostly inhabits Canada, like northern Canada.
Hmm. Yeah, another thing I noticed when making this list is how many subspecies we have, especially with these mammals and the birds. There's so many. There's so many. So I try to limit this list to just the species level. But yeah, there's like iconic subspecies within some of these too.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of that is back in the old days. They were naming subspecies for all these charismatic megafauna attacks on left and right. It's a pain when you have to go through and work with like living mammals and have to deal with
Hmm.
like these old labels where they'll label these subspecies that no one ever uses, even in scientific parlance.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like even like say with tigers, there's active debate over if there's even one subspecies of tiger or if it's like five or six. There's classically been like five recognized subspecies, but there's been like recently this big argument over whether or not they're distinct or not.
Hmm.
Because that again, that in that case, that ties back into conservation. That's fairly important.
Yeah, and one thing that's really contestable too is what exactly constitutes a new species. Like you have a lot of these species that are coming out that are being described as new, yet they morphologically don't differ. It's just their genetics are they're fairly like derived for whatever
Yeah,
marginal amount of time.
it's only identifiable in the genetic profile, not on any kind of morphological or even like there are a lot of animals that have overlapping ranges that we didn't recognize different species till we could actually study their genetics.
Yeah. So like you have to think, is that really a new species or should it be or should it be a subspecies or just, the same
Well,
thing?
in this case, all the bison are different subspecies. All
Yeah.
of there's only one I mean, there's the European one, but all the American bison species are so all populations are subspecies. So which debates about the legitimacy of of the species concept aside is even less a subspecies is even less is even less of a real thing than a species is.
Mm. So I'm thinking B or even C. I would be comfortable with a C tier in it. What do you guys think?
I think B for bison.
Huh.
That's fine.
I think B for bison. Yeah, we can leave it there, and then we can
Yeah.
always swap stuff around later too.
For
Yep.
sure, for sure.
And I got a dog barking in the background. If you can hear it, I apologize.
That is okay. It is another charismatic megafauna.
That's right.
All right, so our next animal is
Excuse me.
the African bush elephant.
Easy S.
Why do you think
Obviously,
S?
very iconic.
It's maybe the most one of the most iconic wild animals ever.
Hmm.
It's they're ecosystem engineers. They're a model of what kind of the world Yeah, every almost every ecosystem in the not every ecosystem, but every continent had things like the African elephant on them. But we're living in an immediately kind of post-extinction world where really these guys are the last examples of what once was almost ubiquitous.
Yeah,
I can
and that
rattle off my quick facts real quick if you're.
go
Please,
for it.
They can weigh, for males at least, 1,300 pounds, which is ridiculous. 10
13,000?
feet tall, and then females up to 6,600 pounds and 8 feet tall. Um, they can live up to 70 years. Male and female both have tusks for African bush elephants. They are obviously the largest living land mammal. They can communicate with vibrations through the floor, up to 110 decibels, and which can be heard for miles to communicate with other elephants. At least they can hear each other, but at frequencies that people cannot detect without our modern technology. They are just truly amazing. And the largest one that we have found and documented was 13 feet tall, over a meter over the average male elephant, and weighed over 24,000 pounds,
11 tons, a little more.
Wow.
which is insane.
Crazy.
And I find really interesting too the social bonds that these things form.
Yeah, they're so
Yeah,
smart. They have their own like culture almost. Like they have like even amongst the various populations of them, there's like their own little cultural identities and practices that are passed on.
Yeah, I could definitely see an S tier on these. I mean, they really have every big checkbox that you would think of when you think of a charismatic animal. I mean, they're the largest terrestrial animal on Earth today. Now, if we went back in time, maybe it would be less impressive, but as of now, at least, if we're just focusing on what's alive today, yeah, it's massive, and they
even
have
if you do go like far back in time, they would still be considered like a relatively large animal,
But definitely,
especially with the bull elephants. Um, just because of how majestic they are and how
yeah,
beautiful they are, and they're so graceful and just overall not just an aesthetically pleasing animal, but an incredibly intelligent animal, and just immensely strong, and just overall very iconic.
yeah. And
yeah.
correct me if
They're
I'm wrong, but it is fairly unique for a herbivore to have such high level of intelligence that the African bush elephant would have.
right. That is really interesting. I think it's because of it's ultimately because of how dexterous their trunk is. It kind of encourages developing mental capabilities.
Yeah, I would go S tier on them. What are you guys thinking?
Yes.
I've got no
That
argument.
works.
All right.
Easy money.
So already off the bat, we're starting strong in the upper half of the tier list.
Hmm.
Our next one is another American icon, the bald eagle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of Merca, I think of this right there.
Who
Awesome.
doesn't?
Yep. I mean, the founding fathers liked it so much because the eagle was such an important symbol in the old world, and
Hmm.
multiple cultures. The most famous one being Rome, identified very strong with the eagle, and then Germany and England following that continued to kind of use that cultural motif. And here we have an American version of that that's very visually distinct and unique to our wild regions.
Yeah. The bald eagle specifically, I'm not entirely. I've heard this story several times, so I don't know how true it is. So the the founding fathers wanted an eagle. They were debating about having eagle be the national bird, but they didn't like it because the eagle from Europe, the golden eagle, was specifically associated with what they considered tyrannies such as Rome, Imperial Germany, the British kings. Supposedly, part of the reason they picked the bald eagle was because it's a fish eater, and at that time it was thought to be mostly a scavenger.
Hmm.
But I'm not sure how true that is because there's also a lot of superstitions around that time that the bald eagles would carry off goats and children, and it wasn't until like the 20s that scientists really started looking into this thing. It's like, no, this thing does not even eat, land animals most of the time. Like it eats ducks,
Yeah,
maybe
I'm not
occasionally.
too sure about that because I mean the founding fathers were really into Roman iconography, and that's like everywhere in the Senate,
Right.
in their preferred style of architecture, in their kind of anti-Caesarian
It wa
liberator.
it was, but at the same time, like there is like in what's it called? The sign iconography. So the golden eagle had an association with like kingship a lot.
Right,
And I don't think they were probably thinking of Rome specifically, but in like the European monarchies,
right.
like probably half of them had a golden eagle on their crest.
That is true.
Yeah, and these are also highly intelligent animals too. I really
Mhm.
find it interesting how people underrate the intelligence of birds. And especially when you're talking about birds of prey, those are among the most sophisticated, I would think, of birds.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
they
phrase
don't
bird
have.
brain is not deserved.
Yeah, birds are way out. Birds probably beat out mammals in terms of like average intelligence. I'm not sure. I'm kind of shooting from the hip on that one.
Yeah.
Please tell
I
me if I'm wrong.
I don't know. They say a lot of mammal intelligences might be underestimated as well because so many of them are nocturnal. And the idea is that you put a nocturnal mammal in a brightly lit room and ask it to do tasks. It's just going to sit there and blink at you like an idiot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, and they're pretty impressive too with like just how strong they are and how, for their size, what they can carry. They can carry up to about a third of their own body weight while they're flying. Um, they can live up to 20 to 30 years. Females are usually a little bigger than males, surprisingly, and they can weigh anywhere from 6 to 14 pounds. They're actually called white-headed. That's the bald part of it. It doesn't actually mean like their feathers are gone. They're bald. That's just an old word. Um, and they have a grip strength of 400 pounds per square inch, which is
Ow.
also super impressive. When they're flying, they can go up to 60 miles per hour while gliding, but in a dive, they can reach up to 150 miles per hour. Uh, and as my last fact, their eyesight is about 8 times better compared to a human.
Yeah, and this is
Wow.
another thing that we get to when we're talking about charismatic megafauna. When you look at a bald eagle, you think, yeah, yeah, that's megafauna. But if we
Mm-hmm.
were to think about megafauna as in like it needs a weight requirement, like you said, these things are what, like 6 to like 20 pounds or something?
let me check.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Well,
real
roughly
quick,
6 to 14. It depends on the bird,
Yeah.
and depends male versus female. But even though that may not be super heavy overall, if you're just talking about birds in general, it's pretty big.
yeah,
yeah.
female raptors are actually larger than the males, and that's one of the few examples in the vertebrates where that's
Hmm.
the tetrapods where that's true. It's an adaptation for being able to continuing to be able to fly and do raptorial stuff while also carrying eggs.
Interesting.
And speaking of what, they're another an enormous conservation success story. They're of least concern. Their range is greatly restricted from what it was, which was basically the entire continent, except for maybe some of the more desert regions pre colonial times. But they were highly endangered. Now they're on least concern.
Yeah. I think that these are one of the most, at least growing up in the US, one of the most iconic animals you can think of. Like very few animals can like envelop a sense of patriotism that like the bald eagle represents. And you just see it so often, whether that's just in everyday life or if you're like
Hmm.
tuning into politics or whatever. The bald eagle seems like unanimous with America.
Yeah.
Hmm. It's just such an icon. And the only complaint I have really about them is their call, like the sound that they make. Most of like what people think of that like the eagle scream isn't actually from bald eagles. It's a hawk's It's a hawk
It's a
scream.
red-tailed hawk,
Um,
right?
yeah, it's a red-tailed hawk. Um, and I think it's just really funny because we wanted something that like sounded so cool.
Fierce,
Um,
but really
and
they
they just
kind of
really just
like
little
tweak.
Tweety birds.
They
Yeah.
sound like a seagull throwing up.
They really do. They're just like they're just laughing like dolphins.
Yeah. I think that it's an S tier. I mean, it's basically a dinosaur that has flight, and that's a macropredator.
Hmm.
Probably one of the is there anything that like would regularly predate bald eagles?
I mean, nothing generally. Well, so nothing really makes a habit of predating on raptors, but like if one gets injured or something, like a coyote will come and eat it or something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have no natural predators. So if there's like an instance where one is injured, I mean, I guess a coyote would go over and, snack on it if it could, but nothing's going to be actively
Yeah.
hunting a bald
They're
eagle.
they're not populous enough to like be a consistent food source for any predator.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And too big for anything that it shares the skies with to attack.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And obviously, like if it's a baby in a nest, a raccoon could get in there. That's happened before, but outside of people, nothing is trying to kill these.
Yeah. I'm gonna go S tier on it. What do you guys think?
I like it. I like eagles a lot generally, so like, but
Yeah.
I
I
also
love
think that
birds of
maybe
prey.
this
The
is
bald
one of the
eagle is like
things we
the
start
symbol.
knocking down when S tier gets filled up.
Hmm.
'Cause we have a long list of very cool animals.
Yeah. So do you guys agree with S or something else?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm chilling with this.
All right. Our next animal on the list is the blue whale. Now, this
The
is
blue
something
whale
that I
is
feel like
just
has to be an S tier.
I'm gonna contest this.
really.
I'm gonna contest it. I am directly involved in the current hunt for the largest animal ever, with ichthyosaurs being a top candidate for that, and these guys are our final boss opponent
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
that we're comparing it to. So it's a purely opinion bias preference, but they're an obstacle for my research to or my volunteer research to try and beat.
Mm-hmm. They are pretty massive. Like having to compare anything to a blue whale is a big like standard to
Ask,
me.
yeah,
Like,
big ask.
Yeah,
yeah.
these are, if anyone doesn't know that's watching this, the largest mammal or the largest animal alive today. These things
Hmm.
reach 98 feet long. And how much do these things weigh?
The
Two,
record is, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, they can weigh 2 to 300,000 pounds. They live to 80 to 90 years old. They can actually get all the way up to 110 feet long.
Oh, really?
Not on the average, but they can get pretty long. They can cruise at usually 5 miles per hour. Since they're so big, they're not super fast, but they got still have a top speed of about 20 miles per hour.
Record weight is 199 tons.
That
Hmm.
is crazy.
It is. They can actually eat up to like 6 tons of krill a day too. So they're they're packing it.
What's crazy too is that this is just, at the end of the day, a highly derived mammal,
Hmm.
like
Yeah,
most
that
of
is
the other
crazy.
animals on this list.
An incredible feat of evolution.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, you're talking about a mammal that evolved to make its primary environment water until they became fully aquatic. And
Hmm.
now you have this as a baleen whale, so this thing lives off of filter feeding. They have incredible dives, whales as a whole. Blue whales, no exception. And then they're just massive that this environment allowed mammals to get this huge. That's just insane.
Yeah, these are artiodactyls that took to the water, became the largest animals that we know of, confidently.
Hmm.
Developed an enormous slew of adaptations to be as aquatic as they possibly could be, and including developing elaborate songs to communicate with each other over entire oceans of distance.
Yeah, and they're very emotionally intelligent. As far as like them interacting with each other, even though it's not very often, since the ocean is pretty big, like the bond between a mother and a baby is just they're inseparable.
These things are really, really impressive animals. I can't see it being in an lower than at least lower than an A tier.
Okay.
And
I'll consent to A tier.
to A.
Yeah.
What do you guys
But
think? Do you think it's
but
an
if they're
A or
not
an
the biggest
S?
animal of all time, then
Well,
you know,
the thing is,
I,
when
I
we talk,
I'm being intentionally a devil's advocate.
well, when people talk about it, and they do, they often bring this up that animal, like where's the large animals alive today? Because when we look at like ancient prehistoric times, there's all of these like massive sauropods and things like that. But then people fail to realize a lot of times that we live in a time where whales have reached these massive, massive sizes. Like, you didn't have blue whales in the Miocene when Megalodon was around. Baleen whales were significantly smaller. So this is a pretty recent evolutionary feat.
Yep, and
I,
it's made possible by the kind of the developing of the modern tectonic regime that encourages like an Antarctic circumpolar current that lets an enormous amount of nutrients upwell from the deep sea into the sunlight, where these algal blooms that support krill populations, which in turn support the largest known animals of all time.
Mm.
So they're animals that are also dependent on like the specific conditions of global geography that only exist right now, and a million or 2 years into the past.
I can't see it lower than an A, and I would go S on it.
Yeah, I can understand A. Personally, I would stick it at S just because it is like the largest that you can go in the modern day. Um, and they're just beautiful animals.
All right,
I hope to
I
be
am
able
prepared to be
to see
outvoted if
one
you guys
one
don't
day.
want to put it in S.
Bucket list.
What do you think,
um,
Russell?
it doesn't matter to me.
I,
It
I'm, what are you gonna say?
nothing.
Yeah, I'm gonna go S. So that's two S's, one is indifferent, one's an A. I think the S wins.
All right.
That was a hot take. I don't think you expected to go
Yeah, no,
for
I'm aware that it is a hot take.
this question mark is the blue whale. I don't know why it's acting up.
It's a questionable ranking.
Our next one is the Bornean orangutan.
First of all, gorgeous, beautiful animals. Um, Super intelligent. I can rattle off my facts real quick before we get into the rest of them, but they on average can be about 5 feet tall for males, 4 feet for females, anywhere from 80 to 200-ish pounds. The males get those big cheek flaps, um, usually maturing at about 2 to 4 years. They can actually prolong it, that way they don't grow them uh, later on until another male gets them, because they'll usually just have like one dominant like male that was like the guy. And that's the one that will usually have the cheek flaps, and that's the guy who's usually like the family man. That's the dad of all the babies. They have a super high IQ for animals, 70 to 95. Humans actually average at about 100, so they're on par. And, I've met some people below 100, so. And they can be even 5 to 7 times stronger than people.
I mean, to be fair, that's not a huge achievement because literally any animal our size is going to be a lot stronger than us due to the way our bodies are built.
It is true, but with their stamina and how, they get through up in the trees and stuff, it is still pretty impressive.
Russell, that's pretty interesting. Could you speak a little more to that? Why humans are so weak for our body size?
So, just as a bit of I've, sorry. So as a bit of a context, I once took a class from Johannes Haile Selassie. I think he's at University of Arizona right now. And the first thing he pointed out in terms of the modern fauna is that humans are one of the weakest animals for our size, and we're the second slowest animal in any ecosystem, depending or not on whether there's a giant tortoise present. And I've heard this from other anthropologists as well. There's a bunch of reasons for this. Like I've talked to other anthropologists at my college campus. So among other things, our bones are basically hyper brittle for an animal of our size. We have a very, very high percentage of trabecular bone and almost no cortical bone, which means that our bones are basically made of balsa wood. Our muscle
Drink more
density
milk.
is
Easy.
yeah, our muscle density is extremely low, and on top of that, basically our brains take about 25% of our entire glucose requirements, and our cells basically have special channels in them that mean basically our muscles don't get half the stuff they need to be as strong as like a chimpanzee or an orangutan or something, because our body basically steals most of the glucose just to keep the brain going.
Hmm.
So on top of that, a lot of the muscle leverages for a lot of our muscle attachments are not very strong. So basically, even though, like, yes, we're a large animal, even though, you could argue, yes, the big thing about humans is our intelligence, even compared to something like a deer, we are much, much weaker and much, much more fragile. And that's before you even take into account domestication syndrome, which like hit us like a baseball bat.
Okay. Well, and we're also pretty gracile because we are actually pretty good at moving long distances.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're efficient in our ability to move
Right.
our
And that's
bodies
part of the reason
from.
for the trabecular bone is we're efficient at moving, but in order for our body to move bipedally, so our body rocks from side to side as it moves, but to do
Mhm.
that it requires very large amounts of trabecular bone, because trabecular bone can bend slightly versus cortical bone's just stiff. So, like, if you notice when you walk, like your shoulders kind of bend from side to side, your spine kind of shakes back and forth. Like, that is partially allowed by the trabecular bone, and cortical bone would not allow people to do that. But trabecular bone is also super fragile. It's the stuff that you get like bone marrow in it. No, it's not quite bone marrow, but it's porous. It's more like that almost.
Yeah. I mean, our body plan is really well suited for like you said, Cole, covering long distances. And I like to think of us more as a marathon running species than we are a sprinting species compared to other animals. Like
Definitely.
jogging, like we're really well suited for long distance pursuits,
Yeah.
whereas we'd be outrun by basically anything.
We're a species of marathon running snipers that
Yeah.
occasionally have this tendency to go nuts and mob things like songbirds.
So what are we thinking on the orangutan?
I'd say B,
Yeah,
because a
I'm
lot of it
leaning more B or C.
because a
Yeah.
lot of it is their own biology holds them back half the time. Like they're very intelligent social animals, but then they're hamstrung in their own environment because they feed on fruits that are very rare. So even though they would prefer to be social if given the chance, they can't because the food in their own environment is just too scarce.
I could see B or C.
Yeah, I think C's good. Just because we got nothing else in C yet.
Our next animal is the bottlenose dolphin.
I'm personally not the biggest fan of dolphins, just because
They're evil.
they are pretty evil. Don't get me wrong, super cute, and as a kid, I loved them, but every time I learn a new fact about a dolphin, it just
It's
gets worse and
uncomfortable.
worse. It just continues to scare me throughout time. Um, However, I have been in the water with a bottlenose dolphin before. Actually, when I turned 18, I visited a wildlife center in Florida for my birthday, and I got to go swim with the dolphin. It was super cool.
It's a
Um,
risky endeavor.
it was a very risky endeavor, and this was like right before I had learned a lot about dolphins. So at the time, I was having a blast. And the dolphin was very like well trained, and I had the trainer in the water with me, and I could touch the bottom and all that, and I wasn't in immediate danger. However, looking back on it, I was like, wow, I was really in the water with that thing. And on that same trip, I was also in the water with sharks. Obviously not at the same time as the dolphin, but I felt more safe in the water with the sharks than I did with the dolphin. Um, they can live up to 60 years. They can get 6 to 13 feet long. They can swim at 22 miles per hour. They give each other names because they're super highly intelligent, and um they learn from each other, and each group kind of has their own way of hunting, their own way of interacting with each other, their own way of flirting with each other. Um, and kind of similar to humans, teenage dolphins are usually the more how do I put this? Troublesome. um,
Rambunctious.
they actually steal pufferfish and get high off them because they're poisonous, and it doesn't really hurt them, but it does get them a little high. Um, so they will literally just do drugs in the ocean and then go like attack something.
And torture a prey animal.
Yeah, pretty much.
I keep thinking when you're reading that of the Teenager song by My Chemical Romance and how it just applies perfectly to that.
That is their anthem for sure.
And don't these things have larger brains than humans do?
Their brains are pretty big.
Well,
I'm
they're also
not
bigger than
sure
humans are.
compared to humans, but I do know they do have really big brains.
Their
Yeah.
EQ isn't like I'm trying to remember what the exact species is. There's a specific type of whale that's like in second place for having the largest relative brain size of any
Mhm.
animal alive today. I think it edges out chimpanzees even slightly, but not by much. But like the bottlenose is not that whale. It's like I think it's I can't remember what the species actually does, but their EQ is pretty high. There's a concept in brain research called the gray ceiling that basically there's a certain absolute and relative brain size that most animals just can't break because they start hitting diminishing returns on neuron scaling. And there's really been somewhere between 3 to 5 groups, depending on who you talk to, that have actually broken this ceiling. And that is anthropoid primates, elephants, dolphins. Uh, some would argue certain pinniped species do this. And then there's another group that may or may not have broken this ceiling that is kind of still being researched.
Yeah, and I found really interesting too um the interactions that dolphins can have with people. I mean, yeah, there are some horror stories, but the other interactions where they like work with local fishermen in return for some of the fish, I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, the legends of them rescuing shipwreck survivors and that kind of thing.
Or like
Yeah.
protecting shipwreck survivors from sharks.
Yeah, they
Or
they have
like
a pretty
warning divers
favorable.
that, yeah.
Yeah, they have a pretty favorable cultural depiction, like as even as far back as like ancient Greece.
I think that these would be a solid B tier animal.
Sure.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Personally, I would put them at C, but that's just because of my own personal bias, kind of similar to your blue whale bias.
My anti-blue whale ideology.
Hmm.
So our next animal is the brown bear. These are also iconic in America. These are in Europe too, though.
Hmm. Grizzlies are pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I work in Alaska.
So
I
you're
have
probably
to.
a little bit
Enough
more
said.
terrified of these things.
I literally get fined if I don't have bear spray in my pocket between the months of May and October,
Hmm.
or April and October, excuse me.
Yeah, these are one of the cutest things that will absolutely kill you.
Yeah, friend shaped.
Yeah,
Exactly.
definitely. Teddy bear.
Like look at how cuddly
Look at
that
the
animal is.
ears. Look at its ears.
Yeah, how can anything attack you with rounded ears like that?
He just looks so soft. Like I just want to lay on him like a beanbag, you know?
Yeah. And these are another one where we talk about these different subspecies. Like there's multiple iconic ones with the brown bear. You have the grizzly bear, which is probably, at least in America, the most iconic of them. You also have the Kodiak bear. I find it interesting. I also find it interesting how closely related another animal on this list, the polar bear, will be to
Hmm.
these. Because if I
Yeah,
if I
brown bears.
recall, huh?
Oh, I was just gonna say brown bears compared to polar bears is a little bit of a jump just because of like how massive polar bears can get, but still a grizzly is is up there on my
Well,
list.
if I recall correctly, these bears would be paraphyletic in that the polar bear is closer related to some brown bear subspecies than some brown bear species are to other
Oh,
other brown
really?
bear
Yeah,
subspecies.
polar bears are a very, very lost group of Irish grizzly bears, pretty much. There's a paper, trying to find the exact paper. There's a bunch of pop science articles on this,
Here, while you're
but
looking, they can stand 3 to 5 feet at the shoulder, up to 9 feet standing, run at 35 miles per hour. They can live 20 to 30 years. They can weigh 200 to 1,300 pounds. And bears actually, fun fact, have the largest brain size relative to their body in mammals specifically,
Except for people.
except for people.
so yeah, Edwards et al. 2011. Polar bears are paraphyletic relative to grizzlies, and specifically based on, I think, a combination of genetic and fossil evidence. They seem to have originated in Ireland and then island hopped to Greenland and then spread out from there.
I don't think they need an island hop, right? They can just walk on the ice. This is
Right,
during the
but then,
last ice
like,
age.
yeah, this is during the last ice age, and I say island hop with massive air quotes.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it really shows too what a geographical isolation will do to a species, and that would help explain why um, an isolated group of brown bears could evolve traits that are so drastically different looking than what we see with the other brown bear subspecies that likely had a wider distribution and were able to travel and possibly interbreed easier.
Yeah, I mean they can still interbreed today. There's issues up in
Yeah.
Alaska where
The
grizzlies and
grower
polar
bear.
bears, yeah. And of course, it turns out it's not like them doing it extensively. It's that like it turns out that certain individual grizzly and polar bears have preferences. And I'm trying to remember if this is the case, but apparently it's like the hybrid ones will have preferences for those of like the more distant related species because I guess it's a parental
Ge-
like
Genetic diversity.
not well the explanation I had heard given is it's like parental imprinting, kind of like how they always say like humans tend to, favor partners that subconsciously remind them of their parents.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And actually,
Freud was right again.
I'm I don't remember if it's all or most, so I won't clarify, just because I don't want to spew off, but I'm pretty sure that most um, polar bear and grizzly bear hybrids come from the exact same female polar bear.
Yes, they do. They're
Interesting.
and apparently some of those offspring have been also those are the ones that they had found had taken to more interspecies breeding.
Hmm.
Like they had found like two Pizzly bears that were like several years apart. Turns out they had the same mother.
Pizzly bear is like the cutest name for a bear.
Yeah, I'm going to call these an A tier animal. Like what we said, these are pretty iconic animals and they have I don't know, they're just so adorable, yet you see people like they love them and yet they fear them, and they're super prolific in the Americas.
Kind of.
At least in
Or
North
used to be.
America, although there used to be brown bears down in Mexico even.
Yeah. I remember there was actually a grizzly bear fossil that was found not too, basically down by Cincinnati, which is not too far from where I am. And like my part of the country, we have almost no bears, period. We're just starting to get black bears coming back in from Pennsylvania. But it's amazing to think that like there were these, megafaunal species extending all the way into Ohio, relatively like not that long ago. It's late last glacial maximum, but that's not that long ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going A tier in these.
Yeah, I would safely put them in A tier, I think.
A's
And
fine.
again, we can always shuffle stuff around later.
Right, moving on, we got the California sea lion. So I'll move this over here. So these things are basically when you think of a pinniped, these are one of the iconic ones. So like if you ever see like seals doing or pinnipeds doing tricks, they're the California sea lions a lot of times, like in circuses and aquariums, things like that. But these things are also adorable. I guess in this picture it's not particularly flattering, but they're basically just sea doggos. What do you guys think about them?
I find pinnipeds generally be very underrated.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
How
agree.
successful they are. Like nobody thinks about them when you think of like marine tetrapods, you don't think of these guys. But like they're highly successful and haven't really been had their populations curb stomped in the way that whales have. And I think they're one of the rare animals that are doing largely fine despite humans encroaching on
Mhm.
their habitat.
Yeah, obviously there's always trouble with like overfishing and stuff being in the water, but as far as most animals go, yeah, they're not they're not doing uh too hard out there. They're living their best life, honestly. They can get up to 200 to 250 pounds, live to 15 to 25 years, even out in the wild up to 25 years, and in captivity a little longer, but that's with most things. They can get up to 12 feet long, um, or sorry, 8 feet long. I'm looking at the wrong notes here. 8 feet long. Uh, yeah, they're just
I'm sur
overall really strong swimmers, good fishers. They're very agile in the water, even though on land they're kind of just bouncing around, but their back flippers can be used as feet on land, unlike most other seals, where they just kind of are bouncing around. They actually can walk on land as well.
I'm surprised that they would only get to like 250 pounds. They seem like they would be much heavier than that.
Yeah, you'd be surprised because a lot of their weight on land looks a lot heavier than it is, just because a lot of it is blubber, um, which is just like a big long fatty layer. But if you look at them like in the water and stuff, they can get way up there.
There's an Alaskan slash Canadian species called the Steller sea lion. I
Mhm.
saw one at the Seward Aquatic Life Center I guess about a month ago, that are much larger than that.
Absolutely.
They
Those
get
ones I believe get up to closer to 2,000 pounds, don't they?
2,500 pound big males, 2,500 pounds
2,500,
during
yeah.
mating season. And they
Those
had a
ones,
big male there. It wasn't mating season, but he was still like bigger than a grizzly bear, which was really caught me off guard.
Yeah.
So,
mhm.
One thing I often
according,
heard of,
I was just gonna say real quick, according to Wikipedia, the heaviest recorded male was 1,460 pounds for the California sea lion.
pinnipeds can vary a lot in weight depending on geography, sex, maturity, and even just individual variation.
And the time of year.
Oh yeah.
The males bulk up to fight each other.
I was looking at the female versus male. You were right. The males can get up to like closer to 1,000 pounds, whereas the females usually stay smaller, closer to 250.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's some pretty crazy sexual dimorphism in these guys.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you think about what a sea lion is, it's really interesting too, because these are caniforms, so these would be in the same order as your dogs and your bears, things like that. And yet they have adapted into a semi-aquatic marine ecosystem, a niche that's really cool.
Yeah, I'm looking up something here. I'm trying to remember if they're specifically more closely related to bears, but I think they may not be. They're just kind of like they're like sister to the mustaloids, I think.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I thought it was mustelid, but I also get most of my things from reading, so I pronounce things wrong all the time.
Yeah, as
Uh,
long as it sounds
but that
right
sounds
to
right.
you,
Yep,
it's good.
yep. Grade A science communication here, fellas.
And thank you for the correction on that weight. As I was saying it, I was thinking about it, but I appreciate your honesty in correcting me.
Yeah, no, I was just looking at these things. I'm like, no way can something that's like 9 feet long that's made of blubber be 250 pounds. Yeah, these are chonkers. But yeah, I would say that these would be a solid A tier. I could see a reasoning for a B tier, but just thinking about how, again, how derived. seals and sea lions as a whole are. It's such a
I would
cool thing.
I would stick them more at B tier than A tier. They are pretty awesome, but compared to some of the other stuff that I know is on this list, I can think of a couple that I would definitely put above it.
Yeah, I mean, this list is basically think of the coolest animals ever. Here's 40 of
Mhm.
them. Is the sea
Yeah.
lion cooler than like
The top
80,
40.
80% of these animals? I don't think so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
would
is a
I would put it
challenge.
closer to the middle of the list.
So you're thinking lower than B or at
I
B?
would say C,
Yeah,
C.
honestly.
C is good.
I mean, they're nice animals, but like they just don't stand out.
Hmm.
Hmm. They are very intelligent, and obviously like they're funny and goofy. Anytime you see like videos of them, they're always having a good time and all that. But even though in the wild they can get pretty aggressive, especially towards each other, particularly with males, um, it is something that I would more think of like being a kid's favorite animal
Yeah,
more
I've
than
I've seen them. I've seen them
nature.
snatch kids, man.
Bouncing a little ball on his nose.
Yeah. I guess a C is fair.
Yeah, let's get this thing a C and move on.
And our next animal is the capybara, which is the largest rodent alive today.
Yeah. I was surprised when I saw this guy on our list, but I was pleasantly surprised.
You have some cool facts about these?
Yeah, as you said, they are the largest rodent. They can live 10 to 12 years. They get 20 to 24-ish inches tall. They can weigh 80 to 150 pounds, and they are definitely herbivores. Very docile, super friendly, one of the
Famously
friendliest
so.
on the list.
In a list of the charismatic animals, these are definitely one of the most charismatic.
Very, very cute, very iconic. Made
I
me
mean, it's a
smile when
guinea
I saw
pig.
it. I was like, oh.
I heard on Facebook a month or two ago someone referred to them as a guinea pig, and that's stuck with me since.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
lot of great memes of capybaras.
Hmm. I was gonna
they're
say they're actually so docile that a lot of predators won't go after them as often as some other prey, even though they would be relatively easy to
Easy
catch. They're
prey.
just so chill that they kind of just get along with everybody.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of these things just chilling along a riverbank with like caiman.
Yeah, pretty much. Find it funny though that on average they weigh more than I do, which I was surprised by. I was like, oh, well, because I was picturing them as a lot smaller in my head.
Yeah, no, they are megafauna, which is really cool considering they're rodents.
Hmm.
I mean, these guys are technically in the area that my lab group studies, because they're from South America. Though the thing is, they're a bit too young. They're a bit too young for the localities that our lab group works in. The group as a whole seems to first show up at the mid Miocene, and they start becoming crazy diverse during the late Miocene, largely at the expense of the native ungulates, or rather these things seem to be better adapted to the drying climates than the noda ungulates are. And like by the latest Miocene, early Pliocene, they and the armadillos have basically taken over the place. They're actually the
I
same fam. They're in the same family as the guinea pig.
Yeah, and they resemble them. And what I think is really cool too is how many photos there are of them just with multiple offspring.
Oh yeah.
Like these things are reproducing like jackrabbits, you would
Yeah, they
think.
got that
I would probably put them in B tier because they're not the coolest animal, but they're just so adorable and charismatic.
super R type.
Yep. B's fine with me.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah,
S-
But
I
be
would
prepared to
probably
knock it
agree.
down.
Yeah, I
That's
think it would be definitely a chopping block.
yeah. I that's kind of why I advocated them not being on the list because I knew we would have to like rank them low, and I do like them.
So our next one on the list is the cheetah.
I love cheetahs. I really do. They're gorgeous. When I was a kid, like thinking about like the fastest animal, that was so cool. I was always like race the other kids and in my classes when I was like in, fifth grade and whatever, and just going crazy, be like, I'm a cheetah.
Yeah, I thought the cheetah was my spirit animal growing up because I was really
Oh,
freckly, And I was also the fastest kid in my fifth grade class. So
That's right.
I was like,
Well,
that
we
that
went in
makes
the
me
same
basically a
school.
cheetah.
Does anyone know what the fastest recorded speed of these are? Because
I
these
want
are
to say
the
70
fastest.
mph is like
It's
fastest
actually
recorded,
it's
but maybe
actually
not.
more. My research said that it would be 50 to 80 miles per hour is the average, but I think the fastest recorded is even more. Let me look it up.
Because yeah,
Cheetah.
these are the fastest terrestrial animal.
They're also ultra specialized for speed, which makes them kind of um any ultra specialized animal is going to be more vulnerable to
Yeah. They're also
ecological
incredibly
changes.
inbred,
Yeah.
partially because they're so specialized. They're so genetically homogeneous that they have no risk of organ transplant failures. They've tried
Mhm.
like skin grafts and stuff for like veterinary purposes, and the grafts will always take perfectly, basically.
Hmm.
Yeah. They're
Interesting.
really cool with like the way that their spine is even like the way that it's articulated throughout their back just is so incredibly flexible, which is how they're able to stretch out their legs so far to get a lot of distance between each step. They actually spend more time in the air when they're running than they do on the floor, almost as if they're flying throughout. They can only weigh up to like 75 to 140 pounds, which for a big cat, as far as like if you think of like the top big cats, like the jaguars and lions and stuff, and tigers, they're a little bit on the smaller side, especially since they're so thin. But if you notice, if you look in the picture, their chest is a lot bigger just because they have to have so much more space for their heart and their lungs in order to run as fast as they do. Um, and they live to about 8 to 10 years.
They also do like cooperative hunting. I think they're the only cats besides lions to really do that.
Yeah,
Big cats, anyways.
they'll tag team. Usually they don't have
Yeah.
huge groups like how they do in lion prides, but
Right.
definitely, 2 to 4, sometimes 5 cheetahs will work together, especially if they're siblings.
And aren't these technically not big cats?
Yeah, they're related to mountain lions.
Hmm.
Well, isn't a mountain lion a big cat?
No, they are
Okay.
related to like garden variety cats and bobcats and
Right. Well,
stuff.
I thought big cat was like a polyphyletic designation and not like a not
No,
like
it's
the
monophyletic. I'm
gotcha.
trying to see if they can
I didn't
actually
know it was a
purr.
real
I'm not.
taxon. I thought it was just like
Yeah,
pachyderm.
it's Felinae versus Pantherae.
Okay, gotcha.
I
Yeah,
think cheetahs can purr.
yeah, they
Yeah,
can, but they can't roar, which is one of the bigger defining characteristics of big cats is that they can roar. But cheetahs do kind of make bird sounds. They like chirp and they squawk and they whistle to kind of communicate better with their kids and stuff. They'll use higher pitched vocalizations, which sounds so cute. I highly recommend if you have free time, go look up cheetah sounds. It's super cute. Um, um, Interesting fact about baby cheetahs, actually, they have like a white stripe down their back and their sides are a little darker to kind of mimic a honey badger, which are super aggressive and most
Ooh,
predators
interesting.
will avoid at all costs. So when they're young, baby cheetahs will actually mimic those and just kind of lay down. That way they kind of blend in a little more. That way, like, say, um, some other predator comes up and sees the baby cheetah there, they think, oh, I'm not messing with that. That's a honey badger. When in reality, it's just a little sleeping cheetah.
Nice.
What I find cool about these two, and it's a little heartbreaking that they deal with severe social anxiety, and you
Mm.
see in zoos, um, these like support dogs, these emotional support dogs that just hang out with the cheetahs and like befriend them.
It's
Yeah,
true.
they're like pretty docile temperament, and I've heard people talk about like them as contestant would be a good contestant for domestication. Not sure how true that is, but
Oh yeah, I've heard like they take to being tamed pretty well. Like
Yeah,
historically,
humans
people
are
would keep
strong.
like rulers would keep cheetahs as pets. Like
Yeah,
they
right.
weren't
humans are
necessarily
strong.
common.
They're definitely still very wild. But as far as like if you compare them to other big cats, they usually are a little bit more docile. But
Right.
I would not
No,
use
they're
the word
not house
domesticated
cats.
around them.
Yeah,
Nuh-uh.
candidate for domestication, not domesticated.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
a better way to phrase it.
yeah.
Like, you are not pets. You do not want this guy in your living room.
Right. Well, if I end up as a drug kingpin, which you never know where your career path will take you. I have an
Trying to
idea
break
about
bad.
what have an idea about what my pet will be.
So what do you think we would rank this one?
Um, I think C tier, too specialized, too socially anxious, not charismatic.
That's crazy, ripping on it for being an introvert.
Hey, charismatic megafauna. Introverts aren't very charismatic.
Well, if we're looking at extroverted megafauna, then I guess the capybara should be S.
Ooh, but
But then the dolphin would be S.
yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to be part of your
So you're thinking C.
C for cheetah.
I guess. I guess. Does everyone else think C?
with a heavy heart.
Well, if you had your way, what would it be?
Ah, that's bias. I have so much bias just because like I wanted to be a cheetah when I was a kid. I would put it at S tier, but that's just me.
Well, we would put all these animals at S tier if like we were analyzing their respective clades.
That is true. That is true.
Oh, except for one. There's one animal on this list that I'm going in hard on, directly to F tier, which we'll get there when we get there. But
All right. What do you think, Russell?
That's fine.
C?
Yeah.
All right, we'll do it. Sad day for the cheetah lovers. See, and yeah, nothing is in our lowest tiers yet. So it'll get interesting when we start getting down to it. Our next one is the chimpanzee.
speaking of evil animals, ugh.
Oh, yeah, are you kidding me?
These things terrify me. When I
It's
watched
so
Monster
rude.
Quest, they did an episode on feral chimpanzees within America, and they panned it to a story of a family that domesticated or quote unquote domesticated one of these. They kept it as a pet, and it was nice and all until it wasn't, and they got they got severely mauled by their chimp.
Yeah. Have you heard that 1911 call?
Yeah,
If
was
you know,
that
if
that
you
might
know,
have
you
been
know.
on Monster Quest.
Yeah, that was crazy. I remember I have, I'm gonna admit something to you guys. I have a genuine phobia of apes in general, but chimpanzees is at the very top of that list. They scare me a lot.
Very aggressive. They grew a giant brain and immediately decided to use it for evil.
They're
Yeah,
like all
pretty
the
much.
worst parts of humanity with none of the redeeming
Right.
features.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say with none of the redeeming features. They are still like very social and on occasion can have very um emotional bonds to other groups, members in their groups, and they are very intelligent, so they do have redeeming qualities. However, overall, if I had to pick one primate to never see as a guarantee in my life, it would be that one.
Yeah, I was at a wildlife sanctuary in West Africa,
Hmm.
and I was got some seriously menacing vibes from the 30 chimps they had staring at me through an electric fence.
Their
I wanted
eyes
to
are
move on
so
as fast as
so moving.
possible.
They
Yeah.
uh they actually have a concept of sadism, at least in some individuals.
Yeah.
Like they are smart enough to know what they are doing hurts other living beings, and they actually enjoy it. In at least for some individuals,
Yeah, there is a Wikipedia page for chimp, a specific chimp conflict between two groups of chimpanzees that is treated like a human conflict would, like, with like casualty rates and
Hmm.
belligerence and like, territorial
Yeah,
changes,
they have wars amongst themselves in the wild over territory, over women. They kidnap children and kill them in front of their
and eat
parents. They
them.
take hostages. They're pretty crazy and just overall very, very scary to think about is like that's a real animal. They can weigh
so
80 to 130 pounds. They live 30 to 40 years. They usually are about 2 to 3 feet tall, but can stand up. Like if they go all the way up, they're even taller. Um, they are technically omnivores. They don't eat meat as often, but they will eat even each other. So they are pretty
Terrifying.
crazy. There was a study that I found a while ago that not for this project specifically, but a while ago, I remember there was a study done on these two separate troops in the wild where they were observing them and just taking notes on what they found. And both of them were very like aggressive, stereotypically what you would imagine a chimpanzee troop to be. However, one of the groups, um, something went wrong with their food, and a lot of them got sick. However, since chimpanzees have such like a hierarchy when it comes to who eat first, only the really like top boss, stronger, more aggressive chimps got really sick. And all of the ones that were a little more docile didn't, just because they weren't eating the food that the stronger ones were getting. So what happened was all of the super aggressive chimps died, and all that was left was the more docile ones in the troop. And they continued to just like remain docile, and they didn't really like change once they had no opposition. And they just like groomed each other and had more babies, and those babies were a little less aggressive, and it was really an interesting study. I'll have to see if I can find it again. Whereas in the other group that didn't get sick, they remained pretty aggressive, and when with the next generation they were also a little bit more aggressive. And it was just really really interesting to me to see nature versus nurture in that, which you don't really see a lot of in the animal kingdom outside of people, just because, nature is nature. They're going to like be a little bit more leaning towards that side outside of, like say an aggressive dog. Usually, you have a bad owner, then the dog is usually a little less well behaved versus a good owner. The dog is a little more well behaved. In the wild, it can happen even without human interference.
For my animal behavior class, we had to watch a video of chimpanzees. I'm trying to remember if they're either eating a baby chimp from another troop or they were eating a small monkey. And the way chimpanzees eat things is just horrible. They're not like cats. They don't have large they have large canines, but they're not like specialized for shearing meat. They're not like dogs where, I mean, being eaten by dogs is one of the worst ways to go because they eat their prey alive. The chimpanzees specifically went about killing and eating this little baby chimp while it was still alive in probably the most gruesome way possible, and they just split it open like a roast turkey and just started pulling it apart and just stuffing their mouth with the gore.
Damn,
That's
And
this
terrifying.
video might get demonetized.
that was actually one of the most disturbing things I've ever had to witness.
Yeah, and they so the pattern that of wounds that chimp inflict on humans is very similar to the pattern of wounds they inflict upon each other.
Mm-hmm.
They target the first they target the hands, then they target the I think it's the eyes, and then finally the genitals to kind of like take you out as your ability to fight back, and then your ability to reproduce. And that's how they deal with each other as well. Male chimpanzees, and I find that alarming.
I'm
All
going
right,
to have to put them in an F tier
how
for
about
that.
E tier? How about E for evil?
E.
I kind of feel bad with all the with I honestly I know someone who works a bit with primates, and I've always had the temptation to ask them, for all these horror stories that you hear about chimpanzees and bottlenose dolphins, like how much of that is like a few weird individuals as opposed to typical of the species as a whole? Because I have to wonder, like, if aliens are watching humans, are they telling each other stories about what humans do to each other the same
Yeah,
way that we're
about
talking
like
about chimps and dolphins?
yeah, about like Ted Bundy is like a typical human.
Well, the thing
But
is, I feel like a lot of the behavioral traits that we see, especially a lot of these ones that are deemed socially wrong, I feel like a lot of these are stuff that we can look at chimpanzees and see that we are animals. We are related to these, and a lot of the issues that we have in our society can come from these primal behavior patterns that are within other members of that are closely related to us, and that the difference that we have is we more so construct like laws and all of these different um, we question things more in a way that chimpanzees don't, that allows us to construct these more complex civilizations that we can say, yeah, this is universally wrong. And I find that pretty fascinating because like again, if we look at like tribalism, you can see certain aspects of that within humankind, just as you can within chimps. When you look at certain things like um, I guess domestic abuse, you see certain trends like how step families, they have higher rates of domestic abuse or child abuse than you see within biological parents. And the you see this same exact occurrence within chimpanzees. You see things like infanticide, and you see this even in other groups outside of great apes. You see infanticide where you have these non paternal parents that they will target children that aren't their own. And while it may not be, I guess, the same, you can still see the evolutionary aspect of that behavior.
Right. They're like a dark mirror for humankind. I'm more like prone to believe the negative stereotype of chimp behavior because of how well documented actual warfare is amongst chimpanzee groups. That's not a weird psychopathic individual.
No,
That's
no,
like a
like that's. But I mean, to be fair, like that kind of behavior is not abnormal for humans either, unfortunately.
right,
It's
right.
true. It is kind of like an uncanny valley type of feeling in the animal kingdom. Whenever we see a chimp, a lot of time, we've all at some point this kind of called them evil. Um, but a lot of the stuff that they're doing that we are considering evil is a lot of stuff that people do.
Yeah,
Obviously, not the
absolutely.
majority of people, but it is kind of something that makes you think about like humanity and what makes us human and all that. So chimpanzees kind of have that existential crisis vibe about them whenever we end up like deep diving into their
The-
brains.
Yeah,
they're an uncomfortable sister Texan to have.
Yeah,
and we have to
and
keep in mind too that evil is a construct that we have created, whereas in nature, it really doesn't exist. It's what we perceive
Oh, certainly.
as
Oh, yeah,
evil
yeah.
and
We're
unjust.
using evil as like a very like a joke.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
But like
Not
in nature, this
and
stuff just
to make
it
it clear
happens.
that these are all just very cultural concepts we're projecting onto animals that don't have such a thing.
Yeah.
But you know, calling them evil is fun. So, and this is a fun podcast,
Yeah.
a pro fun podcast.
A disclaimer: we do not actually consider these things to be evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would go E for evil.
Yep.
yeah, supposedly there are some stories of like altruism in chimpanzees,
Oh, of course. Yeah.
but like you just don't hear about them as much.
Less fun.
And it's really interesting to compare like chimpanzees to say gibbons, who
Bonobos is the famous one.
bonobos. Sorry, thank you for the correction.
Oh no,
Bonobos.
so I mean, I think you can compare them to gibbons as well.
Yes, but like if you look at like physically, they're just so similar. Just they just have a more soft vibe about them that doesn't seem as murderous. Um, whereas like they're just so much more docile and they resolve conflict in a much safer, less harmful way. They just kind of have, you know,
I
they
get
do the devil's tango and solve
well,
all their conflict that way.
there was a recent study that came out that said that the idea of presenting bonobos as these super peaceful, primates is probably a bit misnomer. They're peaceful for a primate, and primates are kind
Relatively.
of
Yeah.
are infamously violent among members of the animal kingdom. They're not the most violent. There's actually another group that's more. There's two other groups I think that are more violent than them, but like bonobos are peaceful asterisk for a primate.
What
Yes.
groups are
Because
more violent?
Yeah.
ground squirrels and the one who takes the trophy are meerkats and social mongooses.
I
Interesting.
will say squirrels are evil. When I was a kid, I would be just eating some cinnamon graham crackers, and those things would just not care at all. They'll just run up, steal my graham crackers, and leave and then eat them in the tree next to me.
And
Yeah.
they'll slow you down while
They're
they
You,
do
you
that.
Evil.
know where prairie dogs get their milk from?
No.
So out in the wilds of North America, there famously aren't a lot of protein sources on the grassland. So what prairie dogs do is they go down the burrows of other members of their colony and they cannibalize their babies in order to get enough protein to make milk for their own offspring.
Oh. Yeah, if Gentleman of the Corax was large enough to be monetized, this episode definitely wouldn't be.
Yeah, nature do be like that.
Yeah. Well, on that, we'll go to our next animal, the common ostrich.
All right. Ostriches, they can weigh up to 220 to 280 pounds. They are 6 to 9 feet tall. Contrary to popular belief, they do not bury their head in the sand when they get scared. That is just a silly thing that, people would tell the kids. They don't actually do that. Um, they can live up to 30 to 40 years and run up to 30 to 40 miles per hour.
I think they're the fastest biped alive today. I'm not entirely sure.
Oh, that's
And the
definitely true.
heaviest bird.
I mean, it's not they have a lot of competition, but
Yeah, that's definitely true. The ostrich is like the most commonly used like analog for theropod locomotion. I mean,
Mhm.
they are theropods, but like for how dinosaurs moved and how they would have how their physiology would have worked as these large animals, the ostrich is kind of the closest thing that we have that we can study today.
Yeah. They actually have a kick force as well that is about 2,000 pounds PSI, which is, enough to kill you. If it
Enough
gets
to
you
enough to break Johnny Cash's ribs. Fun story. Um, Johnny Cash had a pet ostrich, and it like drop kicked him in the chest and broke like all his ribs, and it caused him so much pain that it relapsed on drugs.
I wonder if that was revenge for Johnny Cash nearly wiping out the California condor.
Oh, he was responsible for that?
Well, he crashed his car into the facility that had like the last 11 of them and killed a couple of them.
I have no idea that that's
Oh my God. He's
John,
not
Johnny Cash has a very complicated relationship with large birds, it seems.
Yeah.
I'm gonna probably go D tier on these. Like
Yeah,
they're
they're cool.
massive, fast birds, but if we look at um like theropods or dinosaurs throughout history, these things really aren't very interesting.
I mean, they're interesting in the sense that they're a big theropod that's basically managed to coexist alongside large placental mammals, and it just doesn't seem to care that it's living in the same environment as lions and leopards and African wild dogs.
I hear
Well, it
their
still
meat's
gets
super
preyed
good.
upon by them.
Oh, they're good. They taste pretty good.
Awesome. Do you guys know any Russell, are you speaking from experience?
Yeah. If you go
Dude,
to you're in Nevada, right?
yes,
If you go down by Zion, there was a restaurant there that used to sell ostrich
that's
meat.
so sick. Okay.
But I mean, I'm not entirely sure. There's actually not an insignificant number of ostrich farms out west. I've seen ostrich farms in Arizona because I mean,
Yeah,
I
there
guess
are
the
some here.
climate's
Oh yeah, I'm thinking like what did I say before? D, E tier?
that's fine.
Which one were we
I'd be okay.
thinking?
I'd be okay with that.
Yep.
They're pretty cool and they're beautiful, but
D tier.
yeah.
So our next animal is the common warthog. So this is just Pumbaa.
It is pretty much just Pumbaa. Not to
Yeah.
say just Pumbaa. Pumbaa is fantastic.
Although I will say this Pumbaa has a pretty nice set of hair, a lot nicer than mine. I
Yeah, warthogs lived about 7 to 11 years in the wild, but they can get up to 20 years in captivity. They can run up to 35 miles per hour and weigh 120 to 250 pounds.
yeah, these things are I mean it's just a wild pig. I
Yeah.
would
Pretty much.
say, oh, I was just gonna say real quick, if pigs like these weren't alive today and we found fossils of them,
Oh,
these things would be super cool. But I feel like growing up knowing about pigs and their relatives, it's
Their
not as
teeth are
much
really
so.
bizarre. I try to remember. I think they have like
mhm.
their teeth look a lot like elephant teeth.
They do. Yeah. They're just kind of really long teeth, which is pretty much the same thing that,
Well, the molars look
elephant
like elephant
tusks
teeth.
are, just
Hang on.
elongated teeth. They're tusks.
And it does kind of bring up interesting points about when we depict extinct animals, what their fossils look like compared to what an artistic rendering of what they look like would be. Because
Hmm.
do we think that we would have created this animal from its fossils if we had nothing to base it on, if it had no living relatives?
With how crazy it's the shape of its skull is, I'm not sure. It's kind of the same thing. Like if you look at a hippo skull,
Yeah,
you have kind of a really odd shape to them that like in dinosaurs and other animals like that we have fossil record of, when their skulls have that kind of similar shape, we're not entirely sure what to do with it. At least to my knowledge. I'm not the fossil one though. You guys are the fossil nerds, not me.
The entelodonts kind of have stuff like that, and there's some extinct
Hmm.
peccaries that kind of look like that.
yeah,
And they're
we get peccaries here in Arizona, the javelinas.
Hmm.
I've been chased by one of those before. I was just walking my dogs down like the wash area across. So on my neighborhood, I live adjacent to this like desert portion that's like undeveloped. And I was walking my dogs at night, and there's this rumbling in the bushes. And then it just like sprints out a javelina, and it just like looks at us. It's like 6, 7 feet away, and it starts like kicking its back hooves. And I
Hmm.
look at my dogs, and my dogs look at me. It was like we telepathically knew what to do. And we just booked it the other way, and then this javelina just started chasing us like 20, 30 yards down. And eventually it just gave up, but I've never felt so in tune with my pets that I did in that moment.
You look in their eyes and you just know like this is not where I need to be right now.
Yeah, yeah, we get a lot of javelinas in Arizona, but apparently they aren't super closely related to true pigs.
no,
Hmm.
they're a different group basically.
Yeah.
They're basically they used to be the New World equivalent of pigs. Um, but like most of them have gone extinct. We used to have like two species that would range across most of the United States, but they both went extinct in the last glacial maximum. And unfortunately, now we have the invasive razorbacks that are basically taking over that niche.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And we have a lot of feral hogs I don't think in Arizona, but like in Texas and things like that. And some of those things get massive.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, what part of what happened as well is that someone had the bright idea, not just, okay, we have these wild pigs in the US, what do we do? Let's bring over some Siberian wild boars, which are from a subspecies that's unusually large for these pigs, and try crossbreeding them with pigs to produce a feral hog that's good to hunt. And of course, that backfired horribly.
Yeah, well now there's tons of feral hogs to hunt, but
Yeah.
they're a really bad invasive animal over there.
Yeah.
Well, part of the issue I remember hearing in Ohio, because we have minor feral hog issues down south, in some places they've actually banned feral hog season. It used to be feral hog season was whenever you saw one, but now it's got to the point where they've started to ban feral hog season because the problem is it makes the hogs too skittish and it makes it harder for hunters to actually find and kill them. And of course they're pigs, so they reproduce like crazy.
Yeah. I'm gonna probably go D tier on these.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't really have an opinion at all about warthogs.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean
well,
it
they're cool, and the fact that they were in Lion King, I think, is what kind of boosted their popularity a little bit. But as far as overall on the list, I would put them a little lower.
yeah, I would say Lion King was like their saving grace.
Hmm. Pumbaa is an icon.
Now we have the Emperor Penguin. These things are super interesting when we think of these as dinosaurs that have evolved semi-aquatic lifestyles where they're really efficient swimmers. They can withstand extremely cold temperatures. These things are awesome.
They are. They're super cool, and they get pretty tall too. For a penguin, 3 to 4 feet tall, 30 to 50 pounds, and can live up to 15 to 20 years.
And they're adorable too. Like who
And
doesn't love penguins?
yeah, I will say though, I've met a couple penguin keepers before. Not at the Phoenix Zoo. There's no penguins at the Phoenix Zoo, unfortunately, but I've been able to meet a couple at other zoos, and through collaborative events, I've been able to talk to a lot of keepers. And I will say,
I have heard that they are the smelliest bird to work with.
Yeah, I've heard that like if you work with birds with penguins being the worst, like seabirds, you will
Yeah.
never smell good for as long as you have that job.
Yeah.
So I'm on their Wikipedia page, and it looks like these things during their peak breeding season, they get pretty large. They get like upwards of 84 pounds, and then they lose weight, and then they lose weight after.
Are they only from Antarctica? Emperor
Yeah.
penguins? Okay,
Yes.
that's cool.
They are very, very specialized for. They're like polar bears. They're very
Right.
specialized for life on the sea ice.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, polar bears are not in Antarctica. They're in the other pole. They're in the north,
Mhm.
whereas these emperor penguins are south pole.
Yeah. They don't interact.
Yeah, as much as it, might seem like they would, they actually don't. But yeah, honestly, I would go A tier on
Sure.
penguins.
Really?
They're just so adorable. They're so specialized. They're so good at what they do.
They are super cute. I will say that. They are. I would go so far as to say probably top 3 on the cutest animals on the list.
What do you guys think?
I don't really have strong feelings one way or the other.
You'd be comfortable with an A tier on it?
Yeah.
Yep, me too, but like be prepared to knock it down.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, so we have three in our A, so that's around half. All right, so we still have some good room. Our next one is the giant oceanic manta ray. Rays really don't get enough love, both
Not at all.
extant and extinct. Very few
Hmm.
paleontologists focus on rays.
Even in
But
like
I'd imagine
even
their
among
fossil
the
record's not
very
great.
Beautiful.
limited not limited, but the very tight-knit world of shark paleontology.
Yeah, yeah, rays really don't get a lot of attention. I mean, you can find a fair amount of their teeth around. You can find barbs of rays, but overall, people don't really focus so much on them. Um,
Mhm.
the giant oceanic manta ray is the largest ray that's alive today.
Yeah.
Their wingspan is almost 30 feet for the
Yeah.
largest individuals known. And these are essentially giant filter feeders. So
Mhm.
they consume zooplankton primarily. They have that big gaping mouth. They're really, really majestic animals.
Yeah. And they can live up to 50 years, weigh over
Wow.
5,000 pounds, swim up to 22 miles an hour. And like you said, yeah, their wingspan can get super big. On average, it's closer to 22 to 25 feet. But like of the biggest, they can definitely get up to 30.
Yeah, and it really shows a large trend that we see, which is body size goes up when we're dealing with these filter feeders because it allows them to bring in more nutrients when they have these large gaping mouths and these big bodies. Like the
And they're
largest whales are baleen whales, which are filter feeders. The largest sharks as well, which we'll get into. So what do we think that this one would be?
I think just on pure wow factor, I would put this a little higher up on the list. Just because like if you've never stepped next to like a physical scale to see how big they get, you can never really grasp just how massive they can really get. Um, they're they just blow me away. They really do, and just how graceful they are. Even though they're not as popular, I would say, as some of the other animals on the list, they are definitely one of the most majestic.
Yeah. I'd consider myself pro manta ray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally see it in the top three, but as much as I'm a chondrichthyan guy and I love chondrichthyans, within the list, I would probably put it in B tier just because we have a stacked list today.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you guys would all agree with B?
I'd go with B.
He's good.
So our next animal is the giant panda, which is probably the most charismatic, maybe even
F.
more so than the capybara.
F.
Directly to F tier.
Why?
F.
These
I'm
useless animals would be going extinct with or without us.
Yeah.
We literally have to bribe them, beg them to reproduce.
We have to
And
show them sex ed videos.
Right.
not only that, but like, have you seen those videos where like they take a newborn baby away from the mom? She literally just gives them up for like a stick of bamboo. So easy. No second thoughts.
Yep. All right. Next animal. Directly to
So
S
there
tier.
is
Don't
there
want to talk
is
about it.
one sort of redeeming feature of them. Actually there's two, but the one that's kind of interesting is they may not have actually gotten stuck in that evolutionary cul-de-sac that is bamboo eating until relatively recently. There is supposedly some evidence that earlier giant pandas had a bit more wide-ranging diet.
Yeah, I don't think the fact that their ancestors were less losers than they are saves them at all.
Giant panda can live up to 20 years, weigh 150 to
That's
200
20 years too long.
and stand about 2 to 6 feet tall.
They're so adorable though.
Don't
They are
care. F.
so cute. They are so cute, and I love them because they're cute, but that's the only reason. It's because they're so cute. They are the
So
most teddy bear shaped teddy bear in the world.
They're supposedly also they can get pretty cranky sometimes. At
Yeah,
least in
they're
zoos,
small.
I hear. They'll actually
They're
grab rats in zoos and eat them. Like, remember, they are very cuddly-looking animals, but they are still bears, and they still do bear things if you give them the chance.
Yeah.
So we have two Fs on the giant panda. What do you think?
What else are we going to put in F tier?
I think F is a little unfair, but considering it's F tier of the best, I'm okay.
Now this will be an upset, but I'm kind of here for the entertainment, so I suppose. So our next one's a giant squid, which we've talked about in our last one. This is
In our
basically
GC.
Kraken. Yeah.
But it's not basically Kraken, which was my point on the last one. People were like, "Whoa, like there are still real monsters out there," and they point to like a mythologically enormous beast from the deep, and they point to this thing which, while impressively long and an impressive animal, is the size of a cow.
At least in
Yeah.
weight, they're
That
they're
is
much
arms.
longer.
Well,
And
yeah,
most of that's
but,
like 2 arms.
yeah, yeah. It's just two arms, two very scary arms.
They
But
can get huge, but most of them do not. They usually like there's been reports of like ones that have like an eye that's 10 inches long, and like the longest one we found was like 43 feet long. But like most of them do not get that big. And they only live like 4 to 6 years as far as we know, which is not very long for an animal of that size.
And they're also very inbred.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works, but somehow their gene pool diversity is like rock bottom despite being found on every ocean on the planet.
yeah, nothing. I was kind of controversially anti-giant squid on the deep sea episode, and I'm going to keep that up on this one because all these fun facts are just diminishing the giant squid in my eyes.
Well, most of the notoriety on these comes from its cryptid status rather than the actual animal
Yeah,
itself.
they are scary. Like a squid that could eat you, and not without thinking about it, is a very scary thing.
Yeah.
But
None of them are really sinking boats as often as people think
Yeah.
they are.
At the end of the day, it's sperm whale food.
Yeah. Like people think that there are these epic battles between sperm whales and giant squid down the deep sea. It's like no,
that's
it's
a pretty one-sided fight.
it's a curb stomp every time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
I
what
will
tier are
say,
we
like,
thinking?
if you get like
D
the
tier.
biggest one that there
D.
is in the ocean versus the, yeah, you know,
So you're thinking deer. What are you guys thinking?
I'd be okay with it.
With
D or
D?
E, yeah.
Well, we room in D. The next one's a great hammerhead, which I'm going to have to advocate as an S tier. These are
We'll put the great white in S tier. This has got to go lower.
no. I mean, look at how weird that head, the derived spalifoil, its head, which it gets that classic hammerhead appearance, but these things get massive. These are basically great white size hammerheads with serrated teeth. So these are apex predators.
And they're immune to stingray venom.
That's interesting.
So hammerheads for a long time there's this question of why exactly did they have that head, and this is kind of one of my personal shames. I used to do speculative zoology as a hobby. That's not my personal shame, but my personal shame is I came up with this idea of what kind of shark would specialize in eating stingrays. I had all these ideas, and then I take this ichthyology class. I was like, no, it's just hammerheads. Hammerheads do it much simpler without any of this weird extra stuff. Because it turns out one of the things that cephalofoil is really good at is actually being used like a hammer to hammer a flat stingray down into the substrate and just bite it to death. And if the thing gets stabbed a bunch of times by a stingray spine, it does not care because it's immune to the venom. That was
That's
actually that was an example of one of the advances of scuba gear, because that was one of the things that they saw once scuba had been invented that no one had any idea was even out there beforehand.
Yeah,
And there's also
I
suggestions that it's a sensory thing too, but we have direct observation of them using that head to bash stingrays.
see if we didn't have hammerheads alive today, this thing looks like it could have come out of the Paleozoic with
Yeah,
how
that's true.
weird
Yeah.
it is.
Well, we wouldn't know they existed because they're sharks.
Yeah, well,
That too.
if like you came across this in like the Bear Gulch, for example,
Yeah.
then you would think, yeah, that is weird. That is one of the weirdest sharks out there.
Hang
So
on.
I would,
I'm trying to figure out. There's this one shark that their head, it's not a hammerhead like, but it kind of reminds you of just how weird it is. It has all these weird growths coming out of the chondrocranium. But I don't think it's actually a hammer-headed taxon. It's just weird looking.
yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff in the Paleozoic. But I'm gonna have to say S tier on this.
I think we can either put this or the great white nest here, and I think the great whites got it one. I think we can put two sharks in S tier, even though this is a shark podcast.
I would say the great white's A tier. It's okay. It's a big shark, but it's kind of just there. It doesn't have a ton to really make it stand out compared to like other lamnids, compared to like, you know, I mean, yes, it's a giant death mako, but
The
Yeah.
giant torpedo of muscle that zooms around the sea,
Well,
we
eating.
have
if
lots
we
of
I was gonna say if we look at these things respectively, the great hammerhead, that's a carchariniform, so relatives of these would be like the bull shark, the tiger shark, things like that. There's outside of the hammerheads, there's nothing like these.
Are they in Carcharina? Like they're like I heard Spherinidae is like in Carcharinidae phylogenetically or something. I don't remember
Yeah, it's
exactly.
contested.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it very well could be within Carcharinidae. It's just highly derived. And within the fossil record, you see hammerheads come up in the Eocene. So it's a fairly recent family of sharks. At least ones that we can definitively say, yeah, these teeth belong to hammerheads. We're looking at the Eocene for that. Whereas if we look at the great white, those are lamniforms, and well, yeah, they're like a big bad shark that's around today, like the big bad shark. If we look at the fossil record of lamniforms, there's been tons of big bad lamniforms and bigger and badder lamniforms within the Cretaceous and the Cenozoic.
They are literally the understudies of the otodontids that got the part after the otodontids died.
Well, I think that you guys being fish people have like an ultra like specialized view of these sharks, like and are a bit disconnected with kind of the public perception of them.
That's
Which
a really nice way to phrase that.
Well, but I mean, if
Sorry.
we're going by public perception, the giant panda would be A tier.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that is true. That is true. But this is a shark podcast, and I suppose people do appreciate your sharky outlooks on things. But like great white shark is like synonymous with like a fierce predator in the same way that an African elephant is synonymous with big animals,
Mhm.
which is why, like from a charismatic megafauna perspective, I think great white sharks are an obvious S tier, and great hammerhead, which are very cool, and you guys have actually sold me a lot on them, are just not as charismatic, neither as charismatic nor as megafauna.
I can
That's my
see.
take anyway. But like, all at the
Yeah.
same time, pop off fish boys. I respect it.
Yeah, I'm going to probably still put them in S tier just because it's
That's
a
fair.
hammerhead that can reach 20 feet long, which
That's
is
fair, which is
insane.
surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really funny because there actually aren't a lot of good measurements for hammerheads out there. Like I tried to find measurements of them when I was cataloging measurements of fishes, and it's almost impossible to find good samples that aren't from like old, 1920s papers where they don't even provide, an extensive list of measurements. They say, "Oh yeah, we think it was about 20 feet long," and like no figure, no scale bar, no nothing. Them and tiger sharks for some reason. There's like no paper that has systematic set of measurements for tiger sharks I could find.
Hmm.
Glad I'm having my way. Yeah, and then the next one on the list is the great white, which we talked about a lot. And it is cool. I mean, it's the iconic shark, and I guess its charisma has kind of done sharks a disservice more than it's actually helped them
Yeah,
conservationally.
that's a good point. That's a
Yeah,
good
with
Yeah.
like
point.
Jaws, I mean that really struck fear in the hearts of so many people
It
and
didn't do
put
good
this,
things for the shark
yeah.
conservation.
Though to be
Not
fair,
anything about
the
dolphins.
story that inspired Jaws was a bull shark.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I forget what exactly it was. It was the New Jersey what shark attack?
it was like 19, it was in the 1910s.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically a shark or sharks attacked people within freshwater areas of, I believe it was New Jersey, and then after multiple people were attacked, there was fatalities. They went out looking for the shark that caused it, and they caught a fairly decent great white shark off the coast of New Jersey, and for a long time people assumed that that was the culprit, but I mean nowadays we realize that these attacks happened in freshwater environments.
He's got to be
So
bull shark.
yeah, in freshwater and brackish environments, so it likely wasn't the great white that did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm surprised you don't have. I'm surprised you don't have a lot to say about the great white.
Well, I mean there is a lot to say about it. Like
It,
Russell said, these are related to makos. They'd be sister to Asurus. Uh, they come from an ancestral quote unquote lesser white shark called Carcharodon histalis. And in particular, the great whites evolved in the Pacific. That's when you start seeing serrations form with a transitional quote unquote species called Carcharodon hubbleyi. But whether that's a species or not is, up for debate because what is a species? Is it a transitional morph that's going into it? Or, it's contested.
Yeah.
It
Great white.
really depends on what people classify as a species or not.
Yeah. Great whites are something that I would expect you to rattle off about more than I would with my like 4 seconds of quick facts. They can swim up to 35 miles an hour and weigh up to 1,500 to 200, 400 pounds.
And another cool thing about these two is that they're regional endotherms, which means that they're essentially warm-blooded and can tolerate colder waters.
Hmm.
So that's another cool adaptation of these. You see other sharks like extinct sharks like Cretaxirrhina has been known to be able to do this as well. They
Ooh.
believe Megalodon too. Makos, their close relatives, are also regional endotherms. These are not closely related to Megalodon, even though people have classified Megalodon within the same genus Carcharodon. That was basically them looking at the teeth, both being serrated, and they're like, okay, big serrated triangles, they're related. But Carcharodon histalis, its ancestor, has completely unserrated teeth, but outside of that is morphologically very similar. So that's why those have been grouped together. And then with Carcharodon hubbleyi, you see a clear transition into the great white. Whereas with Megalodon, we see a pretty clear lineage from Otodus obliquus in the Paleocene onwards, which had
Cool.
more of a mackerel shark style dentition, which is basically a long central cusp and then two lateral cusplets with Otodus obliquus, and those wound up the cusplets reduced, the crowns got broader and started serrating, and that's what we get with Megalodon. So they're convergently similar teeth.
I'd say we can safely stick this at an S tier and head to the next one, in my opinion. What do you think?
S for shark. All
Yes.
right, 5 and S. We got one more spot.
So let's move on to our next animal. We got the green anaconda. So these things terrified the daylights out of me as a kid. Between these and then the Burmese pythons that I watched on Monster Quest, which I guess Monster Quest is kind of a big theme of my childhood, but I was terrified of large constrictors, and I still kind of am.
I am a snake lover. I have a snake myself, and I just think that they're fantastic creatures. They're really fascinating to me. Green anacondas specifically can get up to 20 feet long, can weigh up to 550 pounds, eat about 30% of their body mass, and squeeze about 90 pounds per square inch.
Yeah, these things are crazy. And then, have you ever seen pictures of them swallowing something? Like their jaws extend out so wide, it's terrifying.
Yeah, the way that they do it is their jaw actually is built in a very specific way so that they can kind of um, almost not dislocate it, but they have a way to open up their jaw like so much wider than we can. And they can still breathe while they're swallowing huge stuff because they have a little tube that sticks out of their mouth and they breathe through that tube while they're swallowing something that massive.
Honestly, I tend to not think of big snakes too much, just in general. The areas where I research just tend to not have a lot of dealing with them.
I don't think much. I mean, it's a real big snake.
Yeah, I hated these things as a kid, and I'm gonna let my inner child run loose, so I'm gonna go F tier on them.
Okay.
I'd say D. I mean, they're interesting. They're a big reptile.
I would stick them at D.
D,
D's fine.
but I guess I'll be outvoted on that. Our next animal is the green sea turtle. This one is iconic from Finding Nemo, right?
Yeah, this is definitely one from Finding Nemo.
Green sea turtles can live up to about 350 pounds and up to 100 years old.
Yeah, I kind of think of these as tiger shark food.
Yeah.
They are adorable, and I guess they do get points for when they hatch, they're basically like living through Normandy, trying to get it to
Yeah.
get back to the ocean.
There was a funny meme of at different types of animal births, and it's like bears and humans being born into like a safe, warm area, whereas like giraffes have to fall like 8 feet just to come into the world, and green sea turtles, it just played the clip from Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty cool. I would probably put them in a C or D tier personally.
Yeah.
I'd say
Um.
D just because, they're not even the biggest of their group. They don't really I mean, they're sea turtles, but they're like the generic sea turtle. They don't
Yeah.
have a ton to make them stand out.
Yeah, I mean they're generic. That's I guess their claim to fame is
Yeah.
when you think of a turtle, you think of this.
Yeah,
Hmm.
they've got a pretty nice global distribution. There was a really good segment in Planet Earth 3 about them that I enjoyed a lot. Just kind of how their rising sea levels is kind of wiping out their habitat, and
Hmm.
the sand's becoming too hot. So for a lot of reptile groups, the sex of the embryo is determined by the ambient temperature that their eggs are being laid at.
Hmm.
And as the sand's heating up, it's making like I think 99% of the green sea turtle population's
Yeah,
female.
and that goes for a couple different types of reptiles too, like the alligator and crocodile.
Yep.
I saw that segment too. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm gonna go D tier on
Yep.
these. I mean, they're just a fine animal. That's not like a stupendous animal. We have the gray wolf, which these I think are better than just okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
those are fantastic.
maybe the most
They
important animal on the list.
Yeah, and probably we interact with relatives of these more than basically everything else on the list too.
probably I'd have to go through and look through just to fact check it, but
Well,
Honestly.
I mean, so dogs are basically descendants
Yeah.
from these gray
Dog,
wolves.
dogs are like calling dogs a different subspecies from gray wolf is a stretch in terms of like genetic similarities,
Yeah.
interbreeding potential, and like LCA temporal location. They're
Yeah. And the modern wolf is not really like what the dogs are descended from. They really had a more common ancestor a while ago, and some of them evolved more towards what we see as modern wolves, and then others evolved due to human intervention to be our chihuahuas that we have today.
right. Well, I mean the evolution's kind of always going on. So like
Yeah.
this idea of like things are this idea of a living fossil is very not real, and I know we've discussed that idea on this podcast before.
Yeah.
But in gray wolf's case, like to get a different subspecies, like I was actually just looking at walruses just really recently. The different subspecies of walruses were separated. The Atlantic and the Pacific subspecies were separated, uh, almost like about 700,000 years ago. And
Hmm.
with the gray wolf, the population that produced modern, Canis domesticus, separated from the gray wolf about 25 to 40,000 years ago. So that's an order of magnitude lower than a typical. I don't know how what typical walrus is, but from what I remember, it's pretty like the better part of a million years is a typical subspecies split, and it's an order of magnitude lower between dogs and gray wolves.
Hmm.
Yeah, and dogs are really an evolutionary marvel of artificial selection.
Yeah.
When we look at different subspecies of gray wolves, and they, more or less it's still a wolf, but when we look at dogs based on us breeding them, selecting certain traits that we want for different tasks, they became one of the most versatile animals alive basically ever when we look at the different functions, at least on the domesticated end with dogs. You
Yeah.
can do anything with them.
Yeah, I think that point about like how similar dogs are said, I think we should kind of rank this animal as its own thing without dogs.
Hmm.
I agree. And gray wolves usually stand about 2.5 feet tall at the shoulder, can weigh up to 70 to 180 pounds, run at speeds of 31 to 37 miles an hour, and live up to 8 to 13 years old.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And they're
Uh,
more long distance runners than they are sprinters. So they have incredible endurance in order to like hunt down prey. They can outlast them in a chase.
Yeah, and I think that's a big benefit that gray wolves had, even outside of the usual things when we talk about domesticating dogs. When we had our early human ancestors and you had wolves, how, people would say that, yeah, they sat by the campfire and we gave them like scraps and they evolved that way. But if you think of these as hunting companions, humans, like we've said before, are built as endurance animals. We're not designed to be super fast. We're designed to be able to outdistance ourselves. And they functionally do a very similar thing like that. They're pack hunters that basically wear down their prey. So
Mhm.
I think that that really helped aid in their usefulness with early humans.
Yeah, and their ability to bond really well with each other, I feel like is some of the traits that helped us to kind of bond with them later on, just because they're really emotionally intelligent even without our human interactions.
With that said, I would be terrified going into the woods and seeing a pack of these things because wolves are not domesticated like
yeah.
domesticated dogs are.
Yeah.
The amount of like fatalities on human, negative, extremely negative. I mean, except for them killing livestock, the amount of like really negative encounters I've had with human fatalities, injuries, that kind of thing, is very low over the past 100 years. But if you kind of like look at any semblance of records from like pre 1800, they're like the arch enemy of mankind, number one.
And you can see that in a lot of like children's literature too, how the antagonists are these wolf-like figures.
Yeah, there were like packs taking like just straight up taking over medieval settlements in France, led by like weird kind of aberration. What's that? You've seen Monster Quest. What's that kind of weird? mutant wolf from the Middle Ages. That I mean,
Well, they don't even know if they don't even know what that is.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I've
it's
heard hyena and stuff like that, but
or even like some big dog someone bred to do something stupid with.
yeah, yeah. This to the listener, this sounds like we're talking about a fairy tale, but this was an actual real thing that I, the Beast of Jeva. My French is terrible, but the Beast of Jevadun, something like that.
Yeah, Beast of Givadon, I think. I
Yeah,
don't know if that's the right pronunciation. But
right.
yeah, that's the one.
I think that wolves can get an S tier.
Yep, that's fair.
Yeah, either A or S. Just
Yeah,
depends
just
on where we shuffle things around, but it's definitely in the top two.
just based on how many like if we're gonna like based on how many tattoos people have of these things.
I'm gonna
Um,
go S tier. What do you think, Russell?
I think S tier is fine.
Perfect.
Mhm.
And what's that? Is that gonna be our last S tier that we have right now?
Well, for now,
Yeah.
Yeah, for the time being.
I'm
Yep.
pretty
So
sure we're gonna have to bump at least one of them down.
yeah, our S tier is filled up.
There's just too many cool animals.
There is, but there's one coming up that probably is gonna have to end up being S tier.
Is it the hippopotamus?
We'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah, like we were saying before, with the hippopotamus, if you just looked at its skeleton and we didn't have any modern hippopotamus around, you would think that it's like some alien being. It's
Hmm.
mm,
crazy what their skulls look like.
I think that's a bit overstated,
Yeah,
like as a meme of like the how aliens would reconstruct the animal versus like what the animal actually looks like. I mean, we
Well, like
know
if
that
we had
mammals
nothing
have a lot of
similar.
soft tissue. Yeah, if we had nothing similar, but I think we'd come up with something a little more like a rhino, like still not like a hideous reptile gremlin thing,
oh
but
yeah. Well, it's like
we
there's a lot of these hippo-looking animals in the fossil record, which, like, it's really hard to tell if they're semi-aquatic or not. But I
but
mean,
like
looking at the skull, we'd probably just reconstruct it as kind of looking more pig-like. The issue is more if we'd probably have some of the tusks protruding because, we'd be reconstructing after like say a warthog or an elephant. But
yeah, yeah, that's
it's not like they'd look like a dinosaur.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we generally understand that mammals have a lot of soft tissue in their faces that reptiles don't have.
And you can see that in the bones too. You can see kind of like there's big areas for soft tissue to be present.
Hmm.
Like you can look at like I'm looking at hippo skull right here. You can see they're very big, you know, adductor chambers for the masseter, and you can see kind of where they go.
And these things are super dangerous too.
Oh
Like
yeah.
we don't usually associate these type of animals as, more herbivorous leaning animals as being dangerous, but hippos, don't they kill more people in Africa yearly than crocodiles do?
That I don't think that's true. I don't.
They do
I
indeed kill a lot of people, but I'm not
yeah,
sure statistically how much more they kill. But
yeah.
definitely
This was
very.
kind of a pet like a pet topic that I was really interested in. I mean, it's kind of impossible to find like solid numbers on it, but like the general estimates, like people like to hippos are used as kind of like a punch, like, whoa, but did you know that hippos look friendly and cuddly, but did you know that they kill more people than anything else? And from what I from the closest thing to real essence I could get, I still think crocodiles beat them out. It's just more so a meme than really something that's reflected in data. And I think at this point, any kind of posting about a hippo online, you're going to immediately get people flocking to it saying, "Whoa, did you know they look cuddly, but did you know how dangerous they are?" Because it's a way for people to show how much they know about animals.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, whereas
Or I remember
they
someone
are,
actually did kind of do some of the numbers, and they found basically the two most dangerous animals in Africa by a very, very large margin are mosquitoes slash biting flies, which are two different things, but they count them as
Mhm.
one because you can't really tell the difference when people get bitten by insects. Then
yeah,
humans, and then there's a very large gap to everything else.
right. Yeah, and mosquitoes just are only really just disease vectors.
Right,
They're not like using mechanical trauma to tear a person apart.
right. And I
Uh,
think the four that were highlighted as the most dangerous were leopard, hippo, crocodile, and Cape buffalo.
yeah.
Mhm.
Hippos are, of course, extremely territorial and aggressive. They're very scary animals. but crocodiles like hunt people. Like they're the only animals to really do that.
Well, keep
And
in mind too, if we're talking about just Africa, crocodiles have a much larger distribution
true,
than
very
hippos do.
true, very
Yeah,
true.
Right.
not only that, but they're in places where more people would be just because they're, in the water all the time and people are, going to be by the water just for, you know, human purposes. So it's
Right.
more likely that we'll run into them versus like a pride of lions.
Well, it's
True. Yeah.
like, and they've been extirpated from a lot of their range. Like used to have like say hippos in Egypt, not anymore. Used to have, I think, there's evidence of Bronze Age hippos living along the coast of the Eastern Mediterranean. They're all gone.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of the Bronze Age, there were I started but didn't really follow through on like an Egyptian history, like ancient Egypt history kick, and just kind of going through the first, second, and third dynasties of pharaohs, and
Hmm.
what we could tell about them from like the very limited hieroglyphic records we have of their own
Right.
Egyptology. More than one first, second, third dynasty pharaoh was killed during a hippo hunt.
So apparently hippos kill an estimated 500 people a year in Africa.
Yeah. And we can
I've
never.
heard 1,000, I've heard 1,500, I've heard 100. It's
Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
I'm sure that the numbers vary, and then also I'm sure that reporting isn't super accurate to
exactly
begin with.
that's why there's this huge error range.
Hmm.
But let's talk a bit more about the animal itself.
Yeah.
Some of the numbers that we do know is that they can run up to 19 miles per hour. They can live 40 to 50 years. Females typically weigh around 350, but males can get all the way up to 900 pounds. Their tusks can grow up to over a foot long, and they have a bite force of 1,800 pounds per square inch.
Unless if you're Mudang.
Unless you're mooding. Just
Well,
bites you
Mudang's
Mudang
a
is a
pygmy.
pygmy hippo.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
different type of people, but still an honorable mention on the list.
Oh, definitely.
One of the most adorable animals alive.
Another fun fact about hippos is they're actually not as great swimmers as you might think they are. Even though they primarily live in the water, more often than not, they're actually just walking on the floor or floating at the top, more so than swimming in the water. They kind of just bounce.
Mm.
Yeah, they can't swim. They actually sink in water.
Yeah.
I think
Because
I'm
it's high
trying to
muscle
remember.
density, right? Like
Yeah,
they're
well, and
not
their
fat.
bones are pretty thick too. I think they
Yeah.
have pretty pachyostolic bones. Not the most pachyostolic bones, but
And do they have any natural predators?
Lions, kind of,
Like, yeah, I was gonna say lions kind of just because
occasionally.
yeah, a really desperate pride of lions could definitely take on a hippo if
well,
it's
the
like
thing too is if they're out of the water, they're a lot more vulnerable. They
exactly.
they
Right.
they do get nailed by lions out of the water, but it's one of these things where the lions have to be expecting it.
Yeah.
There's like these big animals in Africa. They always say, "Oh, the elephants are immune to predation. The rhinos are immune to predation." There are certain groups of lions that have actually figured out how to, in very specific circumstances, take out adult individuals of these big animals.
Mhm.
But these big animals are so
It's high
uncommon on.
risk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's high risk, and even if they succeeded, if they were too good at it, they'd basically just wipe out the food source, and the behavior would be
Mhm.
lost.
Right. And it's also not like it's not like a consistent food source. It's like something
No,
they
it's
have
like
to do in
it's
a
like
desperate
one
time.
pride of lions. They learned how to do it when food was scarce one year, and now they'll once in a while do it if they're really
Yeah.
desperate.
It's
Yeah.
not like a statistically relevant link in the food chain.
There's always a exception to the rule.
Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
And of course baby hippos.
Yeah.
Those are much easier
Yeah.
pickings. And
Like
depending
crocodiles will eat
on
baby hippos, and like
yeah,
adult hippos will just randomly decide to go kill a baby hippo.
Well, usually not
that
randomly, but
emoji.
they usually are. They can get pretty aggressive towards their young, but usually it is for a purpose of like trying to like get the female to not have a kid anymore. That way,
Right.
the male hippo can get their
It's
own.
male competition.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then there's of course the rumors of like the enormous like serial killer crocs being able to take hippos, but
Yeah, there's always
speaking of things that are like not very verifiable and are just kind of based on rumor, that's definitely one of them.
yeah. Well, I mean, with orcas and sharks, it used to just start as a rumor that they battle, but with time,
they've proved that, orcas can hunt down great whites. Obviously, it doesn't happen very often, but it's definitely doable. So if later on we find proof that, some insane crocodile is able to take on a hippo, I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting at Gustav, but I was going to save Gustav for when we actually get to the. Do we have Nile croc on the list, or we have
No, we have
saltwater?
salties.
Saltwater.
Okay, so we can talk about Nile crocs now. There's a serial killer croc in Africa that's allegedly killed 300 people and is so enormous and slow at this point in the very late stage of his life. If he is indeed still alive and
I
has not
don't.
been
I
killed,
think
like
he's
rumored.
hasn't been seen for a couple years. I had to
Right.
look it up for something, but
Yeah, there aren't any serial killer hippos is kind of a point I was getting at earlier. And whether or not Gustav's actually killed 300 people, he's definitely killed quite a lot of people. And there's rumors that he's too big and too slow to take usual croc prey like gazelles and wildebeests and stuff. So he takes water buffalo, hippos, and people.
That's kind of terrifying.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Where do you guys think we should stick hippo on the list?
hippo's good. I
Say
think B
B.
tier. Yeah.
Yeah.
B.
I think B is fair.
Our next animal is a king cobra. And this was one that we kind of debated on putting on the list or not because if we're judging megafauna based on weight, these certainly wouldn't cut it, being what, like 20 pounds at the larger end of them. But
Yeah.
they can
Yeah.
reach like 19 feet long.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's good to have a venomous snake on this list, and this is the most famous one. So,
Yeah, this is actually the longest venomous snake that there is, too. They, on average, they get to 10 to 15 feet, but on like the exceptions to the rule, they can get up to like 19, 20 feet, but it's just a little more rare. But the real kicker for them is primarily their venom. Just like 2/10 of a fluid ounce is enough to kill 20 people.
Yeah, these things are one of the most iconic snakes, I think.
Yeah, definitely a symbol. You can phrase it that way. If even if they're not megafauna in the way that they're in the same weight class as a lot of the other ones, if you're talking about like level of danger, this is definitely up top on the list.
The other funny thing about them is that they tend to be specialist predators of other snakes, if I recall right. I mean, there are a bunch of snakes that do that. It's just interesting. That's an interesting habit of theirs beyond just poisonous big snake.
And just as like another fun fact, their way they frill out around their face and they fan out all their skin and stretch it is actually through their ribs. They're able to move their ribs out to kind of flare, to make themselves look bigger and more intimidating and kind of scare things away. Or, for example, like if a big, raptor is trying to get to it, some big bird, they'll flare up and try to, make themselves seem like more of a threat, even though with their venom, they are still a really big threat, but, they do still have predators that will try to eat them. So they have to kind of boost themselves even more than just their bite.
Yeah, venomous snakes don't like to use their venom if they don't have to because venom is very metabolically expensive.
Yeah.
On top of that, there's almost always something in their environment that has adapted to become immune to that venom in most cases and will basically just walk right through any attempt to actually bite and envenomate them.
well, and this is definitely like a thing I saw online and not like a real piece of knowledge that I've obtained. But these things aren't actual cobras, right? They're called that because they eat cobras.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. They're in a lapidae. It says phylogenetically not a true cobra. Well, cobra, it depends on how you define cobra.
Okay, gotcha.
So, like, the traditional cobra genus is the genus Naja versus Ophiophagus. Try to see if I can find a cobra phylogeny. Like, is this convergent versus, like, they're just sister taxa or something?
While you're looking, the animals that are actually immune to their venom are mongooses, which are pretty cool animals as far as stuff that didn't quite make the list. But if we had one right after this, I would put mongoose on the list. Other animals that are known to be immune to a dose of snake venom are hedgehogs, honey badgers, and possums. I'm not sure if that applies specifically to king cobra venom, but snake venom in general usually is not quite as potent as the king cobras. But
I don't know if that's exactly been tested, a hedgehog versus a king cobra.
And how far is the king cobra's native distribution?
I don't think it's that wide. Southeast Asia, to northern India, um, east to southern China, including Hong Kong, western Indonesia, and the Philippines.
So it's hard to say. Like I'm looking at this results of this one study. There's a distinct clade at the base of the cobra family that
Mhm.
includes Naja, the so-called true cobras, also the shield cobras and the king cobra. It looks like it, but at the same time, it looks like the mambas are in there.
Mhm.
Let's see, what's Hemibungaris?
Isn't
And
phylogeny awesome?
An
the
honorable
barred
mention.
coral snake, and what's this other one? And the spitting cobra, which is also not in Naja. Whether it's the ring-necked spitting cobra, I'm not sure if the spitting cobra counts as the cobra either, or if it does or doesn't. Walterinesia.
Sounds like we're
And
gonna do more
also the
cobra
black desert
research.
cobra. So it looks like there is actually a cobra clade, so to speak, that also has the mambas in there. But I don't know. I I'm not a squamate researcher, and I know from experience from having talked to squamate researchers that squamate phylogeny is just borked in general.
I'm thinking C for cobra.
That's
That's
fine.
fine.
Not a real cobra. They do eat other snakes, which is like that is real. I'm not sure if my little etymology source is real, but they do like most of their diet is other venomous snakes, which is cool.
Well, I mean, their
Yeah.
name's Ophiophagus. That means snake eater. That is
Nice.
correct.
Our next one is the Komodo dragon.
Definitely on the top of the list, in my personal opinion, just because I love Komodo dragons. But we'll see. We'll see what the general opinion is here. They can weigh 170 to 200 pounds. They are the largest venomous lizard, and they can be 7 to 8 feet long and live 20 to 30 years.
Well, they're the largest lizard, like substantially.
Yeah, just
They're
want to
they're
include that
the
in this.
last of these kind of very large population or very large groups of
Oh no, they're a
throughout.
recent thing. They're recent. So monitor lizards only got to the Indo-Australian Indo-Australian area until like the Miocene, and their
Mhm.
major radiation has only been in like the last 5 million years. Like they are actively
Gotcha.
pushing towards bigger sizes. Like they had some setbacks with with Megalania going extinct, but and yeah, the Komodo dragon's the last of a much
Enormous
larger
setback.
distribution that was very common during the Pleistocene, but like the monitors are like actively pushing in the direction of larger body sizes
Right.
as
Yeah.
like the prey base in Australia gets bigger.
Right. My point was less so about the actual the actual group of monitor lizards and more so about like the niche that it occupies of like a
Right.
giant cold-blooded animal that
Mhm.
has kind of I mean when the dinosaurs went extinct, they're and mammals take over. Dinosaurs not actually being really most of them not being cold-blooded. Uh, they're and mammals take over. There throughout the Cenozoic, you have these kind of like spots of kind of isolated areas where big reptiles will take over where a mammal isn't available to do so.
Mhm.
And that's been a kind of consistent trend throughout the Cenozoic of that happening with those big South American crocs, things like Titanoboa, and the Komodo dragons are just the last. Megalania and Quicania from Australia in the Pleistocene, but the Komodo dragon is currently the last version of that animal. That's of a reptile that's carved out a niche for itself, where usually we have big mammal predators.
And it's really interesting too how they hunt. You watch videos on it was one of the nature documentaries. They would bite a buffalo and they would just basically wait around until it dies from the bacterial infection from its bite.
There's been studies on that. They don't actually do that. So what it is this herpetologist did some testing on the saliva of these things. It turns out they actually do have a form of functional venom that causes an extreme drop in blood pressure when they bite. The thing with the water buffalo is water buffaloes, if anyone knows about water buffaloes, they like to lounge around in watering holes that are absolutely filthy. So these things would get bitten by the Komodo dragons and then go soak their open gaping wounds in these extremely festering water holes,
They
which
could
the
get
Komodo
stagnant
dragon's like,
pond.
hey, I didn't ask you to do this, but I'm not gonna, complain about it.
Yeah.
Because really, this is a strategy that they evolved to prey on dwarf elephants, which probably didn't do this.
Well, that's
But the
great.
water buffalo
Well,
just walked right into that role of being the same kind of predator, and they would just, they did exactly what the Komodo dragon wanted.
yeah, that was. I mean, I grew up hearing about the septic bite as well,
Mhm.
and that was before we figured out they had venom. Like shockingly recently.
Yeah, 2009.
Yeah, their
Wow.
venom is usually like in their they have the gland in their lower jaw, right? And then usually what I've heard that it does is it just kind of prevents the blood from clotting, so they bleed a lot more. And which like also like will put that animal into shock and it can get more infected, like how Ben said. But we're always learning new things and trying to figure out more about these types of animals, and there's always something new to discover about them.
So yeah, I'm glad I did this podcast with you guys because I didn't know that. So
Hmm.
they're basically infecting themselves. Their prey infects itself by putting itself in an environment, and it
Hmm.
just multiplies its
Yeah.
issues.
Well, and
Yeah.
there's that, and sometimes the prey gets mobbed. Like one dragon bite will like disable its ability to run away, and then it gets mobbed by the 20 other Komodo dragons that are nearby.
Yeah, it's
A
gotten very
horrible way to
popular in
go.
dinosaur. It's gotten very popular in dinosaur research to use Komodo dragons as analogs for these big theropods.
Yeah,
And it's
something I don't
probably,
like very much.
yeah, that's exactly it. That's not a very good idea because these things have like a completely different strategy from what theropods would do. Is, I mean, yes, the monitors are more active and have higher metabolic rates than other like living reptiles, but by the same token, they still have sprawling legs. And I mean, dinosaur like big theropods, as far as we know, do not have venom. Like we don't have any evidence of it in pretty much any taxon. But
Yeah, they don't need to bite the prey and then back off and wait for the damage to be done. Like
right,
they're way too overbuilt for that.
right,
I don't like it. I don't like the consistent theropod comparison because there's it. I think the current trend in paleontology of looking to modern relatives, even though Komodo dragon is not a very close relative, because looking like and kind of taking that as the default assumption is what would a modern animal that's kind of like this do, even when that analogy isn't super appropriate, like in the theropod
right.
case.
Well, there's been suggestions too, because I mean, one of the big ways that this gets brought up is the recurring pack hunting debate, and Komodo dragons get brought out as the analogy of choice usually. The problem is Komodo dragons live on an island, and they live on an island where there is very little natural prey. Which
Yeah.
technically they didn't even evolve on that island. They dispersed there after evolving somewhere in Australia. So the behavior you see on the island is not necessarily what you're going to expect a theropod that's surrounded by abundant large prey to do.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hey, here's an idea. Maybe the giant group of ancient reptiles just did things that are unlike what modern animals do.
Yeah.
And there isn't an appropriate analogy for them in the extant life. But anyways, the animal itself. So back to the animal itself. Monitor lizards are quite intelligent for
They're
reptiles.
very intelligent.
Hmm.
I mean, and kind of getting back to what we were talking about before with monitor lizards, this is something I've heard some herpetologists say. Like, a lot of herpetologists will actually point out that monitor lizards as a thing are not just like relics of some ancient era. They're really a novel reptilian morphotype that's been managing to get in a fist fight with birds and mammals and win half of the time in terms of evolutionary adaptations.
Yeah.
And I've heard some herpetologists argue this in terms of like we should be more thinking of monitor lizards as like this novel innovation of the Cenozoic. Like there are varanoids going back into the Cretaceous, like the mosasaurs are somewhere in there. The maybe squamate systematics are screwed. Um, there's
I think
like
most people treat mosasaurs as sister taxon to varanids at this point.
yeah.
I don't think
But
Mike
like
Everhart does,
there's
but he's
Sanoa, there's like these weird common ancestors between Gila monsters and monitors that are hanging around. But like what we think of as monitors, like these high activity, very intelligent, very active, very unlizard-like lizards, do seem to be a recent thing. And what they seem to be, honestly, is they seem to be the lizard equivalent of producing a morphotype that can basically compete with mammals and birds on their own terms in many cases.
That's awesome. Yeah, they're not relics of the Mesozoic. They're not
Yeah.
relics. They're not living dinosaurs. They're their own unique thing that is evolutionarily pretty recent.
I mean, if
Mhm.
anything, what I'd compare them to is like the really early Triassic Archosauromorphs, like right before they started going crazy with all the diversification, and they're still kind of figuring out what they want to do with a body plan.
Hmm.
The only thing I can truly think of that like hasn't really evolved at all since the time of the dinosaurs and even before that would be like the horseshoe crab. That's the only animal I can think of like that can appropriately be called a quote unquote dinosaur, even though it's not actually a dinosaur and it never
Yeah.
was. It's still like one of the only things I can think of that truly has stayed unchanged
Has
for
seen
that
very little
long.
morphological change. I mean, there's going to be
There's
enormous genetic change between like a Silurian Xiphosaurine
Yeah.
and a modern one. So
Hmm.
like this idea that like things just stop evolving and that they're just the same isn't true. Though in the horseshoe crab's case, they do bear a very prevailing morphological similarity.
They
apparently
kind of found
coelacanths fall
something
in
that
that
worked
category
and
too.
didn't
There's
seem
been
to
some
change.
recent studies that have found like there's been almost no morphological change in coelacanths post Triassic. There's been some, but it's been like very, very little apparently, which I've heard some people say, that's maybe that's not true with more data, but I mean, it's actually been like it's something that actually has data behind it rather than just, oh, we feel this looks like some old Mesozoic thing kind of thing, right?
Right.
Mm. Yeah, so going back to the Komodo dragon, I think that this is also an S tier contender, and I would consider moving something out for this.
Would you be willing to move the hammerhead shark out of S tier?
Bald eagle.
Oh,
Throw the bald eagle out.
the
Throw
Yeah,
the
bald
pull up
chicken
eagle.
out.
again. Pull up the list. Show us on your screen so I can look at them all.
All right,
There we go.
so this is our S tier lineup right now.
I'm thinking probably between the bald eagle and honestly, I hate to say it, but the wolf. I would keep the shark up in S tier.
Hmm.
I would move the wolf probably to A tier with a heavy heart.
So we have a wolf, we have a great hammerhead, we have a
I would
bald
say
eagle.
move the. I would kind of agree with Louise. Say move the wolf to A tier. It's nice, but it's not exceptional. Maybe.
Yeah. Still an amazing animal and A tier is still an honor I think for this animal, but like Komodo dragon is just truly what I think would be an exceptional animal.
Yeah, just based on how much discussion that it's instigated in this chat alone.
Yeah,
I
I agree.
could move the wolf. We agree with that?
Yeah.
No, but it looks like I'm outvoted.
That hammerhead is gonna stay an S. So our next animal is the lion, and this is probably the most iconic animal alive today.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I'm particularly inclined to want to put this up higher, especially since I work at the Phoenix Zoo currently, and just a couple months ago, our male lion passed away. His name was Babu, and he was an amazing lion. So now, and he just had his two sons right before he passed away. So now there's two little lion cubs there, and lions have just been on my mind for the past couple months, honestly, just because of that, because of how impactful he really was as an animal, which I think, is just telling, like how something that happened months ago still is like coming back up in my head just because it's such an iconic animal. They can weigh 300 to 420 pounds. They have a bite force of 700 to 1,000 pounds per square inch. They can run up to 46 miles per hour and live 10 to 12 years.
How
These
long
are
did Babu live? I'm assuming he lived a very long life.
No, he actually died early. He was only 6. He
Oh,
had a really aggressive cancer, and they just, it came out of nowhere, and they unfortunately had to euthanize him. But he really could have lived a more longer full life, but just he just got too sick too fast.
That sucks.
Yeah, and I loved him so much. He was really an incredibly majestic creature. He had a beautiful roar. I loved listening to him and was really just a super impactful animal that just represented like almost all of Africa in a way. Like if you think of Africa, you kind of think of lions. Like that's the
Yeah.
thing. Like
It's the
that's
king of the jungle.
Yeah.
is the
Well, I
king
mean,
of the
the king of the savannah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they call him the king of the jungle, although I don't think that that's
no,
such
yeah,
an
they don't really
apt
live in the
name.
jungle, but they, you know what I mean.
And
Yeah.
lions and the Panthera leo had a much larger um, historical range than it does now.
Oh yeah.
Ignoring like Panthera leo spelaea, the cave lion that was the cold adapted cave lion from the last ice age. Uh, Panther, like the current subspecies of lion was found throughout, basically the entire Mediterranean coast and
Yeah.
even into India and Saudi Arabia.
There's evidence of like humans interacting with what are thought to be wild lions from like Bronze Age Greek archaeological sites, as well
Mhm.
as places like Assyria, which is like eastern Turkey, northern Iraq today, all over
Yeah.
the place.
Yeah, lions are everywhere. I mean, so I'm about to go on a kind of a wild tangent, but the mess up the concept of a dragon is, very much like a modern ad hoc term that describes a lot of a lot of just kind of vaguely reptilian animals that don't really have that much in common. We only group them under the same name dragon because of uh, you know our modern linguistic convention. But in the Mesopotamian origin of the dragon, it actually comes a lot from lions and how important lions were in Mesopotamian iconography.
So in Assyria, one of the things that the king was supposed to do to basically like show he was acting as a functioning ruler was to go out and kill lions to make the to in theory make the road safe. Now, in later times when when like city states and cities were more developed, it was more of a perfunctory thing because there weren't that many lions left. But like in the early days, like that was a real
Back
fear people
back
had of getting
back when the kings who lived in tents. I'm
yeah.
reading about Assyria right now, so this is a cool
What book?
intersection. 11 after 1177.
No,
I'm
no,
on
no, no.
the
What book are you reading? It might be the same book I read.
after 1177.
Oh, because there
The,
was
the
a
the Assyrian Babylonian chapter is what I'm reading right now.
right, because there's a really big book on the Assyrians that was published.
Oh, cool. I have not read that. Assyrians are okay. We're getting way off topic, but
Right.
Assyrians are very interesting. Um, yeah, an animal with like an enormous well, and so part of the reason that this animal that is so associated with uh, sub-Saharan Africa today is so common in iconography from Europe to the Middle East to elsewhere is because it used to have a much larger historical range,
Mhm.
and running into a lion was something that you would have to worry about as a sheep herder in Bronze Age Greece, for example. Another little fun historical fact. Mark Antony, the Marcus Antonius, the one of the great Roman generals, leader of the Second Triumvirate, tried to have his chariots pulled by lions, and it didn't work out very well, and he had to go back to horses. That
I
was
wonder
something
why.
that happened.
So apparently, and people actually have because in fantasy they always like to have people like riding lions or riding tigers or like lion chariots or something. Apparently, part of it is that their spines they're so flexible because they're cats, but they can't
Mhm.
actually support the weight that'd be required to pull pull a chariot or bear a human rider. They're just
Yeah,
not built for
and they would you
people.
can't make a lion go forward if he doesn't want to.
They're cats. They do what
Yeah,
they
Yeah,
want.
that is very true. Very, very true. As a cat owner myself.
So my
yeah.
cat just heard us say that he's giving me the stink eye.
So yeah, so anyways, back to lions generally. Let's leave behind the historical angle, even though we could probably talk a lot more about it. They're like looking at, I mean, just kind of remembering all the different planet Earth sections on the lions I've seen from those documentaries. I was surprised by the different ways lions have adapted to various environments within Africa. Like there are like coastal lions and desert lions and lions that specialize on this prey animal, that prey animal, and how I think that that's really interesting that there's no stereotypical lion like lifestyle.
What I think is really cool too is how different they look, at least their fur coats, than the tiger, even though they're in the same genus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's lots of variation. Like some of them don't have manes. There's populations that just genetically won't develop them.
hmm There's also others where like even the females will develop manes depending
Right.
on
Ooh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
they're very um very different between like most other big cats. Like they have a lot of dimorphism, like sexual dimorphism, but also there's a lot of crossover within that sexual dimorphism.
And they're very social for a cat too, which is odd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They live they live in huge prides. Most actually can consist up to like 10 adults and it's actually uh interesting. A lot of people think like there's only one male per pride, but typically that's only true if they're actively competing. Some prides can even have up to like four males depending
Yeah.
on how big it is. Um,
Especially if the males are related and you're
it,
not fighting over genetic territory as much. It's two
like if there's
brothers.
two brothers, there's a chance that they're not gonna compete as much versus like say there's a male that's coming in from just leaving a different pride and they're coming in. Now that's when they're gonna start to get more territorial and be like, hey, this is my turf, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, to me, lions are basically the modern day T-Rex as far as iconicness and what they do for the general public and getting their interest in biology.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just even looking at like the Bible, like probably the most
Yep.
important cultural like item of the definitely probably the modern world and definitely like most of world history. So this is the most important single like cultural item. Uh, uh, the lion iconography is everywhere. There's comparisons with God, the lion and the lamb. Uh, a lot of the Old Testament stories include lions. David was known for killing lions prior to killing Goliath, etc.
hmm And even just in like children's stories, if you think about like the Lion and the Mouse, where um the lion gets saved by a mouse, or you think about other stories like even just the Lion King, which is obviously not
The
like
best Disney movie.
not the well, it is the best
It
Disney.
is. It is. Yeah. No, I wasn't being sarcastic.
Yeah, based off like Shakespeare and stuff, but the fact that they used lions for it just fits so well because they're just like
So associated with the concept of rulership.
and they make for they're an attention grabber um and they're like really beautiful and interesting to watch and learn about and every time that lions come up like people start to pay attention because they're awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we've talked about lines enough.
Yeah.
Uh, A or S, I think.
Yeah, I think we can't go lower than A.
I'd say
I,
A,
A is good.
you
just because
would
S is crowded and we may have to kick some stuff out of S.
would you put lion above any of the other S tier animals that we currently have?
Maybe
Above,
the eagle. Maybe.
yeah, above bald eagle, and maybe
You
the great white. Well, no, I'd say above great white, but below bald eagle.
so you're thinking demoting great white.
No, bald eagle.
Oh,
Because
I think I
really,
could do that.
because really, outside of the U.S., like the bald eagle isn't as iconic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's definitely more of an American focused animal.
Yeah. The lions are definitely iconic everywhere.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm
worldwide.
fine with that. So we still have our S tier filled up.
All right, what's next?
We have the Maasai giraffe.
All right, giraffes can live up to about 25 years, stand at 16 to 18 feet tall on average, but exceptions can get taller. They can weigh up to 1,800 to 2,600 pounds. They have a heart that is 2 feet long, and a tongue that is even longer.
These
That
things
is,
are wild. If we didn't have anything like a giraffe alive today, they would be crazy to us. It's basically a mammal that convergently evolved to take on a sauropod type of niche.
the way that they fight each other is pretty cool. If you've ever seen like two bull giraffes fighting each other, they use those horns at the top of their head that are just like kind of an extension of their own skull
Yeah, they're not.
to battle each other and hit each other in the neck.
So giraffe, like their horns actually have a special term among mammal biologists. They're called ossicones, and they're considered to be like genetically similar to true horns, but they're not like technically true horns. And apparently giraffes and okapis are the only animals today that actually have any form of ossicones. There
Mm-hmm.
are some like extinct ones that do from different groups, but
Yeah, oh yeah, like that. There's that. I don't remember the name of it. I don't remember what period. I think it's probably Miocene. That like extinct giraffe with the giant dome head.
yeah.
I'm from Colorado Springs, and there's the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo is one of the best places in the world to see giraffes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Get you really, really up close, and you feed them and all that stuff. And it's kind of renowned for its ability to display their giraffes. So I like them for that reason, but
They're also one of the most sensitive animals in zoos because apparently, like, I think you cannot keep them out above temperatures above, I want to say it's 72 degrees because they have almost no ability to thermoregulate and they'll drop very fast.
yeah, because there's so much surface area compared to mass.
It's also really hard to keep them because of their medical needs. Like if for whatever reason you have to like put one under for a surgery or anything like that, it's extremely difficult to do because in order to sedate them, you can't just dart them like how you would like say a lion or a tiger. Because if you do and they fall, they could die. Like they're so high up in the sky just standing that if they were to just fall, they could get seriously injured. So what they have to do is not fully sedate them and then basically like tie them up so that way they can still be standing and then manually lower them. Um, Same thing with transportation. They can't just sedate them, so they have to put them in these super tall vehicles. That way they can still be standing while being transported.
Yeah, how do you like get say you have a zoo and you want a giraffe. How do you
Yeah,
get the giraffe to your zoo?
they
This is
have to
this
be
this is an actual question.
transported standing up. And it's a very difficult process, which is another reason why a lot of zoos don't have giraffes. Like, obviously, they're common in some of the bigger zoos that are able to afford, the means that it takes to get them to the zoo and to take care of them. As you can imagine, giraffe vets are not common. um, but yeah, it's definitely a very difficult and expensive and long process.
From getting the giraffe from the airport or wherever to the zoo, or even like by road, like would you see like the giraffe's head poking out the top of the truck or whatever?
Well, yeah, actually, you
That's awesome.
the
I did see
thing
that on the highway.
you can't put them on an airplane. So they would have to be on a boat. Um, so most giraffes that are in America were born in America. We
Hmm.
don't really like take giraffes from other countries that are like across seas for that reason, just because you can't exactly just stick them, on some airline and ship them across because they just won't fit. Like they're too massive and require too much, like really too many specific needs in order to be transported like that. So I'll I would say I don't know if it's all or most, probably just most because I never want to be like, you know, all or nothing on one. So I would say most giraffes were born in captivity of the ones that are in
Yeah,
America.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're also one of the only animals that can't swim,
Yeah.
like from birth.
I could
Makes
see
sense.
their body not taking up to that super well.
with how tall they are, for most occasions, they would never really need to learn how to, because as long as they stand up, they should be fine.
Yeah. And what are they most closely related to?
Uh,
Okapis, then pronghorn.
yeah, I live out in Nevada, and pronghorn are huge there, and that's one of my favorite things to tell people is that pronghorn are like a relic group of these animals that used to be really common, but especially during the Ice Age, that aren't around anymore, and that their closest relative is the giraffe. They're giraffeoids.
A
Huh.
quick Google search says the okapi is indeed the only living relative of the giraffe today.
Right. So okapis and giraffes are both in Giraffidae, but then outside that, once you start getting into broader ruminant relationships, it's pronghorn and then a broader grouping
Yeah.
of deer plus musk deer plus bovids, which are antelopes, cows, everything else.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking on a rating for this one?
Wherever the lower tiers have open ranks, if it wants a higher tier, it's got to learn how to swim.
I would probably say like E. I
E?
Yeah.
wouldn't put it at the very bottom, but definitely a little lower. I personally would stick it at E. What do you guys think?
He's fine.
Or giraffe. Our next one is the moose.
I mean,
If you've ever
there.
seen a moose, like a big moose in the wild, let me tell you, it is a scary thing. I went to Colorado a while ago, and I went on a hike and I saw one that was standing a couple feet from me, and I almost my pants. It was just a horrifying experience because I admire them for how beautiful and majestic they are. But if you've ever had one look you in the eye, that is a scary thing. They can weigh 800 to 1,600 pounds. They stand at 4.5 to 7 feet tall at the shoulder. Sorry, not at the shoulder, but like, at the before their horns or antlers. They're the largest member of the deer family. They shed their antlers each year. They can live up to 20 years. They are great swimmers. They can run up to 35 miles per hour, dive 20 feet under the water. And because of that, one of their top predators, besides like bears and wolves, are actually orcas.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was a couple of years ago. I watched a bull moose chase a bunch of people down a ski slope.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I had a great view of it because I was in the chairlift, and then I even skied by myself. It didn't chase me, and I had enough speed built up that it wasn't going to catch me. But that was that was my fun little moose encounter anecdote.
Hmm. Definitely a scary experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're in Alaska a lot. They're like I've seen a bunch of them up and around the core shack that I work in. They can be territorial. I think it's a little overstated how territorial and dangerous they can be. It's extremely rare that they actually like hurt somebody seriously or kill somebody.
Yeah.
Um, they are huge and they are capable of causing a lot of damage. But yeah, and apparently moose meat is a popular food in Alaska that
Mhm.
some of the native guys I work with keep trying to get me to come over and try. But
Moose I would definitely put higher up on the list than lower.
I still find it crazy that orcas hunt these things.
Yeah.
it's probably pretty rare. Like I'm sure it's happened before, but like in terms of like a statistically significant link in the food web, probably not very much so.
Well, I mean, if you think about it this way, like there's really only three or four things that can really get to them when they're full grown like that, which would be bears. And even then, like a bear would probably prefer to get something smaller if it can, just because of the high risk that it comes with like getting a full grown moose to the ground. Um,
Yeah,
and the wolves
wolves
like
do take them a lot though, right?
what's that?
Wolves take them a lot though, right?
Wolves do take them a lot just because they have like, they have the numbers for it. And they have the endurance to kind of outlast them, like how I was saying earlier when we were talking about wolves. So more often, wolves will be um, their main predator. But outside of bears and wolves, there's really not much taking them down besides orcas on occasion and people, obviously. But just because they can get so deep down, can you imagine if you were like up in Alaska somewhere, and you were diving down not really expecting much, and then you look over and you're 20 feet under the water and you see a moose and an orca. That would be insane.
That would be one for the ages, that's for sure.
Yeah. And you are right. It's not super common, but it does happen, which is, something to note.
So what are you thinking for the rating on these?
I'm thinking either B or C.
I think B is probably good.
Yeah.
I lean more
Maybe
towards
C.
C because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's a massive deer.
Their antlers are actually supposedly abnormally small for a deer of that size, which they're huge antlers, but they're supposedly oddballs among deer because most deer end up having these really huge antlers like Megaloceros did, but
Hmm.
like somehow they kind of broke the rules and ended up having smaller antlers than expected.
That's interesting.
Hmm.
I'm thinking C. So we have two votes for B. What are you thinking, Russell?
B's fine with me.
C's fine with me as well. I don't have strong
Yeah,
feelings.
C. Let's put it in C.
Can you live with that, Luis?
Yeah. If there was an option between C and D, that's where I would personally put it. But,
We can put it in D if you guys want.
In
D
D, I
point
would
C.
even be fine with D. Do we
I
think
think C
that?
is appropriate for now, and then we can shuffle things around later if we need to.
All right, so keep it in C and then shuffle it if we need.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's fair. Our next one is the orca.
S tier.
Yeah.
Orcas are probably the most ridiculous animals alive today. They are animals that if you tried to present them to anyone else alive today, they would be seen as like if you were someone who like did speculative evolution like I used to do, or you tried to present it as an animal for a movie, you would be accused of designing a complete Mary Sue of an animal.
Yeah.
They are literally an animal with the head the size of a T-Rex and a brain as like adaptable as a human
It
Yeah,
is a
with their
pretty
gigantic
impressive
pack
animal.
hunting whales with giant teeth
with
Mhm.
echolocation.
and an awesome color scheme.
Yeah.
Beautiful color scheme. Their
That
pattern is truly a designer, a designer look. They are really beautiful. It's scary the way that like their eye patches are so big that you like unless you're really looking, it's hard to see like where their eyes start. So it's just kind of this ominous type of look. They can live 50 to 90 years on average, swim about 35
Whoa.
miles per hour, weigh
That's gross.
6,000 to 8,800 pounds. They can eat pretty much anything they want. And they're just overall um, a really beautiful, iconic movie star, honestly.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
at the
they're
highest trophic
also
level.
evil.
Yes, they can have some very violently playful tendencies for
well,
sure,
they're giant
especially
dolphins, so
Yeah.
they are giant dolphins. Really, they are. Like they're kind of like the biggest bully in the ocean, honestly, next to the dolphin.
Yeah.
but the weird thing is that there is almost no records of them ever approaching humans with the intent of like, causing harm. The only
I I
It's
ex
suspect that they're smart enough to do it without getting without being caught. I really think that there's a non-zero chance that orcas kill way more people than we think. They're just smart enough to do it without getting caught.
they frame us, they frame other people. They're like, it wasn't me, it was the great white.
Yeah, on paper, this thing is so much scarier than any shark is.
Yeah, and like in the
Or
wild, it is
megalodon,
true
but
that there aren't really any documented cases of fatal attacks by an orca. However, in captivity, they are killers for sure. I'm not sure if you guys have seen that one documentary, Blackfish. Personally, I think it kind of paints them in the wrong light. However, it does bring up some really big issues with them being in captivity because they go insane. When you put them in a small space, they start hurting people.
yep.
They get really dangerous and they, mentally are just getting ruined. They're not built for anything but the ocean.
well, the other
Um,
thing is like dolphins, they have different languages. And
yeah,
one of the things is when they're in captivity, the orcas that you see are from different pods and they don't speak the same language. Like imagine being in solitary confinement your whole life and the only person who you're around speaks nothing but French.
yeah, and
Yeah,
bullies you because they are not particularly nice to each other in
Yeah.
captivity either. They pick on each other and they compete and they try to do anything just to get food. They're very instinctual. Even though they are super emotionally intelligent, um, they're in an environment that is not built for them at all.
It's a lot like people. If you put a person basically in solitary confinement for a long period of time, they'll go
Hmm.
insane too. Because
Exactly.
they're highly intelligent, they're highly social animals, just like people are. They have their own language, and when you put them in a tiny enclosure and
Hmm.
they can't communicate and they're stuck, that it's just fostering an environment that can cause them to go AWOL.
Yeah, they are apex predators, and when you put them in an environment where they don't really have a choice but to just, like sit in a bathtub their whole life, they go from apex predator to apex serial
Mental
killer
patient.
real quick, because there are like especially like a couple of individuals I can think of just from that documentary Blackfish that killed like more than 4 or 5 people.
Yeah, Tillicum's got I think 3 people.
Yeah. And like if in total I think there was five people had died in that documentary, and then like Tillicum was the majority of that. And
Yeah.
then others like have there's been plenty of injuries and um of them hurting each other and their keepers, and even somebody who wasn't one of their trainers, just a guy had broken in, jumped in the tank, and it did not go well for him.
Yeah, that's so scary. Like if like they're generally, I mean, given how many trainer orca interactions they are, they're fine. But the
Yeah.
second somebody that they don't know jumps in the tank, they start dismembering him and parading around with his body parts on top of their dorsal fins, which that happened.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
They're
Um,
also
Um,
they also have a tendency to be very racist. The resident pod in the was it Puget Sound is going extinct due to their own racism. The
mhm.
population is genetically inbred, but they actively refuse to seek mates from outside their immediate kin group.
In the wild, they are definitely an entirely different animal than versus in captivity, because in the wild, like every pod is so vastly different because they learn from their other family members and they pass on, different hunting styles and different like communication styles, like the way that we talk about how they all have their own language. They pass on like etiquette even, or ways to impress girls. They have their whole society um is just really complex. And so studying them is such an interesting thing because you never know what you're going to get. It truly depends on the individual, depends on their family, and depends on if that family group interacts with other family groups or if they're more solitary. It depends on if it's a megapod or not. There's just so much about them to learn, and so much about them that we will probably never know.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't there two sects within orcas?
There's a
One,
lot
there are
more.
three.
There
well,
There were
there's
there
well
are three main ones.
Mhm.
well, by I meant that there'd be one group that they predominantly they just eat fish and things like that, and then there's another one that actively hunts much larger game
Yeah,
than
there
the other.
there are transient orcas and residential orcas.
and there's deep divers who primarily hunt sharks. And I say sharks, I mean dogfish. I'm not. Now, granted, I want to say that the orcas that have been observed eating great whites are from the deep divers, and the idea is just like one of them figured out, hey, if we eat these little sharks, what if we do the same thing but to a big shark? But
Mhm.
So a very fun story I've read about was a the insane beef that humpback whales have with orcas, because orcas are their chief primary predator. I mean, they're really their only predator, but humpback whales really, really, really hate orcas and have been known to protect prey animals from, or like a humpback whale will hold a seal or a sea lion or whatever out of the water so that it's not it's not at risk of being attacked by an orca. This happened to a person one time. There was a diver who was lifted out of the water by a humpback, and didn't nobody really understood why until later. People realized that there was a pod of orcas in the area.
Which is again, it's kind of weird given how orcas seem to they like to mess with anything in the ocean, but they seem to have a weird liking for humans. Like even wild ones seem to have a soft spot for humans in the same way we do for them. It's just, and like you said, maybe they are attacking humans, and
Yeah, no,
you know,
that's just that I made that up.
no, I
That
know,
was
I
just
know. That's the common joke. They're just smart enough to hide the body. But it's weird because it's almost like they do have a like they're the bully at school who no one seems to like, but they have this weird soft spot no one can explain for humans.
So there are three kinds of orcas: the resident, the transient, and the offshore. Residents mainly do fish and stuff like that. Transients do marine mammals mostly, seals, sea lions, etc., walruses. And offshores are the most mysterious, and then we know the least about them. And then there's all kinds of like various groups within them that are
Mhm.
Right. So the Burke Museum has a whole bunch of orca specimens because, again, it's Washington State. They actually had a bunch of jaws from some of the offshore ones. It's interesting, like I mentioned, that they're thought to mostly eat sharks, and their teeth will almost be worn to stumps as adults because they're biting into, dogfish are covered in denticles their whole life, and that wears their teeth down really fast. At least that's what the current thought is.
These are definitely S tier.
Yep.
Yep, I'd say so.
Let's pull up the list, see who we got to kick out.
Yeah. Uh, I did one last thing is that having all the negative stuff about how orcas are kept in captivity is very valid. It's a very good thing that we are transitioning away from using orcas in captivity, and that largely there will no longer be any you know new orcas introduced into captivity. We
I
can't put
hope
them back
so.
in the wild because there's so much they have to learn just to how to survive. That's taught from the adult figures that one that's not raised in the wild is not going to be able to make it. That said, there is something very reality bending about watching an animal the size of a school bus jump out of the water on command.
Yeah. I I do not support SeaWorld. However, I was given the opportunity one time to go for free and I was not about to turn that down because it's SeaWorld. So even though I'm very against everything they stand for, I got a free ticket and I was like, well, I can't pass that up. So I did go and I did see the orca. But they changed the show so the trainers do not get in the water with the orcas anymore. Um, they came out and I was able to see them and they did jump out of the water, but it was primarily just the trainer standing and talking about the animal more than like doing tricks with it in the water, which I am glad for. And I'm hoping that they continue to, at the very least, not put people in the water with them anymore.
It is kind of sad though. I mean, I'm glad that they're phasing out orcas in captivity. The
Mm-hmm.
sad thing is that once that happens, a lot of our ability to research these animals and actually interact with them in terms of trying to like we're talking about, the intelligence trying to figure out what makes them tick, it'll become very, very difficult to do so because these are animals that just don't interact with humans under normal circumstances. They live in open ocean environments and, it's not we're not the point with, interspecies communication where we can actually convince them to stick around and talk to them.
Yeah, there was that whale documentary for Disney Plus where the main cameraman, the main cinematographer who was kind of running the documentary was underwater with orcas, watching them getting really good footage of them hunting stingrays. And a mom orca killed a stingray and brought him the stingray carcass and like tried to feed him, which was fun.
He
And
better have kept that.
I don't think he did.
So
I,
supposedly that's happened with leopard seals too.
So what do you think we should cut in S tier for the orca?
I'm thinking Komodo dragon.
I'm thinking hammerhead.
I'm thinking great white. I mean, it's
Okay, one of the
poetic, isn't
sharks.
it?
Yeah, I mean the
Yeah,
great
yeah,
white
no,
is
Russell's right.
I would agree with the great white. I think that the Komodo dragon is more unique than the great white is in the grand scheme of things. The hammerhead's definitely more unique.
Yep, great white it
We're
is.
bumping it down.
Yeah, as
All
All
much
right.
as
right,
it hurts to demote a shark. So our next animal, another black and white one, is the plain zebra. So what do we think about this?
I have personal bias. I don't like their personality very much just because they are known to be a little bit more on the rude side. They bite and kick each other and they bite and kick people. Especially like in zoos and stuff when there is more interaction, just because in the wild they don't typically interact with people very often, but in captivity they are known to be a little bit more impolite, compared to a lot of other of our hooved creatures. Zebras can run 35 to 40 miles per hour. They weigh 450 to 900 pounds, live to about 20 years old, and personally, I would put them lower on the list.
To me, they're just a horse with a cool color pattern.
They are very interesting in the way that they've evolved to like, trick predators by, running around and kind of confusing them with their pattern. That is pretty cool, but it's a zebra.
Yeah. What do you guys think about them?
I've got largely
I
no opinion. I'll take Louise's expertise as a zookeeper. If these things just are suck, then they're just horses with a funny color, except you can't ride them. Not really.
They're too aggressive.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're not domesticated. They haven't had their aggressive tendencies selected out.
Was I
Mhm.
think they can't be domesticated because they're too aggressive. That's one thing I always say is that's why horses were domesticated and zebras weren't, because zebras just have that attitude problem.
Well,
Yeah.
horse domestication only came from a very, very like specific region where domesticating them was like very like you have a people living in that region that really were domesticating them was really really advantageous to their way of life. So I
Mhm.
don't think I don't think looking for like why these things weren't domesticated is as appropriate a question as asking why horses were domesticated. So I mean, and I think that the aggressive thing might just be a just so explanation for why they're currently not domesticated the same way the horses were.
Yeah. I'm going F tier on them personally. They do
Yeah,
absolutely
that's
nothing
fine.
for me.
Yeah,
What do you guys think?
That's fine.
croc food F tier,
No argument. Sticking with the pandas. They belong with their black and white
black and
brother.
white. Yeah, put all the black and white animals in F tier.
Except for the orca.
No, orca's going to F tier for being massive, for being have the only one with true psychopathic tendencies on the list.
Our next one's a polar bear.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
P
we
bears.
talked a little bit about the phylogeny of these previously
Yeah.
with the brown bear.
Yeah. I think we can get through this one pretty quick just because generally they are just a pretty cool animal. They stand 6 to 8 feet tall. They can weigh 500 to 900 pounds. They have a bite force of 1,200 pounds per square inch and it can run 25 miles per hour.
These things actively predate on people as well. I would be horrified to come across one of
Yeah.
these.
Yeah.
Yep,
And they,
there most of the towns in I actually not most, all the towns in like northern Alaska and Canada, uh it's illegal to leave your car locked when it's parked in town because people might need to make a quick getaway from polar bears.
pretty
Yeah. And
crazy.
what's that old saying about bears?
If it's black, fight back, brown, lay down, white, good night. I've had to go through bear defense training recently, so and it is fun how much like the fun part of bear training was like you have to be able to immediately identify what kind of bear you're dealing with because your response to it will be very different based on what you can identify. There was lots of trick questions like a very dark colored grizzly bear and a very light colored brown bear and I don't know, it was fun. But I mean, polar bears aren't particularly hard to identify,
No.
No, yeah.
nor are they common nor are they
You know that you're in
present
trouble.
south of the Brooks. So you won't see them where I work in Alaska. They were never that big of a problem for me in that train in that class.
So part of it too is they're one of only two predators on Earth that have no fear of humans. Because they just live in an environment where they don't have to deal with them on a regular enough basis to be afraid.
What's the
And
other one?
oceanic whitetips.
Cool.
And there's actually
Crocodiles?
some. Oh no,
Crocodiles have fear?
yeah,
Yeah,
pretty much.
I'd see so. They still hunt people, but like I could definitely see them like being
So
wary of large groups of people around
the
them.
reaction of lions to seeing a person is the same reaction they give to hyenas, which is basically the lion equivalent of going, "Oh no, these people again."
Yeah.
On top of that, so in Australia, they have all these native wildlife that they're trying to teach to be afraid of invasive cats and invasive placental predators, right? So these things have like no, like they'll go right up to a house cat and try to be friends with it. And it's incredibly frustrating. But it turns out that there is one predator that will absolutely terrify them to death, and that's humans. They will be terrified. They'll try to make friends with house cats, but they're terrified of humans.
Who
Wait,
will?
which animal?
These marsupials in Australia.
Oh,
These
okay, Jenna. Gotcha.
random marsupials they're trying to teach to be afraid of cats and foxes. They have no fear of the cats and foxes, but they're terrified of humans.
Yeah. There's no koala. Yeah, koalas aren't on this list. Another great contender for F tier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to real bears, not fake bears. Uh, this morning, I did some kind of looking into what the modern research on polar bears is about, and basically all the current research on polar bears is, there is kind of the shifts in their habitat that are associated with the loss and regaining of sea ice in the Arctic, uh, which they're useful as like a proxy for studying climate change is the most significant thing about modern scholarship on polar bears, but there's also lots of other very cool stuff that they can do. They can dive for up to 3 minutes. They can swim for as long as like 2 or 3 days. Like, and they can spend 2 or 3 days at sea, making them really marine mammals if you think about it.
Yeah. And they're predominant on all these different islands, like Alaska, Russia. It's pretty cool. Like I think what was it? Island? Wrangel Island, the one that they found some petrified mammoths. Yeah.
Polar bears have black skin underneath their white fur and their white fur isn't actually solid white. It's actually clear, and just because they're usually like by the snow and based on the reflections of the light makes them look more white. Um, but the hairs themselves, the fur that they have, isn't actually like a solid color, which I find very interesting. Um, they're known to hunt pretty much anything that they come across, and their success rate is actually not as high as you would think it is, just because a lot of the stuff that they are hunting live in the water, like seals, for example. So the seals will try to come up for air, and then polar bears try to grab it and swim after it if it gets desperate enough. But their success rate isn't actually as high as you would think. However, they can successfully hunt pretty much anything that they come across.
So if these things can go days out at sea, I wonder if there's any documented cases of orcas hunting them.
Oh, I'm sure. Documented, probably not. Although, has it happened? I'd bet a lot of money on yes.
Yeah, same. I think that it probably has happened just because, regionally they are going to be in the same spot. However, it's kind of hard to track once there's unless you're, really lucky if you're following a pod of orcas, you just happen to cross a polar bear. I'm assuming that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, the thing is that we aren't in these environments all too regularly, let alone scientists themselves.
Hmm.
So there's very few people who actually witness something like that who happen. But yeah, I would probably put these at a higher tier. I think that these could be an A tier animal.
Who we knocking? I'm thinking penguins, 100%.
The penguins.
Honestly,
Yeah, that's fair.
I would
Bears are
even
better
I
than
would,
penguins.
I would even go so far as to say penguins could get knocked down even further than B.
We could. Yeah, so there's room in C for one more addition.
What do you guys think?
I think bears win in a fight, so that means they knock out penguins.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
who did
I'm fine
penguins?
with knocking penguins down to C.
Let's do it.
All right,
Honestly,
so
they might even go to D.
Yeah, I think we were just putting them up there because in the moment we were hyping them up. But
Yep.
realistically, when I look at the rest of the animals on the list, they probably should go to C or D.
C tier, can't fly.
all right, so we have our A is still completely filled. We have the penguins in C, and C is now completely filled, right? Yep. And then we've one room in B. Red
Ah,
kangaroos next.
gotcha.
These things can get jacked. And it's so funny watching the videos of these
Buff
things just
kangaroos.
going up, sparring with people, being
Yeah.
absolute menaces.
But the
Yeah,
thing is,
I've
they're not even
seen.
that big. I mean, they're like, if they were placental, they'd be like deer sized.
Yeah, they're
Hmm.
they're just the deer of Australia.
They're the most dangerous deer I've ever met in my life, that's for sure.
Yeah. So
Uh,
what do we know about these?
Red kangaroos can weigh 80 to 200 pounds, lots of sexual dimorphism there. They can jump about 6 feet high and they can jump 25 feet in length. They are really good boxers. They have a kick force of 800 pounds per square inch. And they can live about 8 to 25 years.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get in a fist fight with these.
Not at all.
That goes for almost every animal on the list, honestly. These
I
are
I could
the
take my chances with the penguin.
right. Like in terms of this list and animals I want to fight, kangaroos are actually pretty high up on there.
Really?
Look at the list.
There's only
What
like
do you think
two.
my odds of fist fighting an orca are?
There's only two or three animals that are on here that I think I could genuinely take in a fight. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I could probably beat the cobra in a fight, but like, with I'd have to take a trip to the hospital afterwards. But
I think it depends on who has the element of surprise.
Yeah, I
very
think that the kangaroo is definitely the quintessential animal. Whenever you think of Australia, the first thing that comes to mind outside of anything else is kangaroos.
They are pretty cool. And every feature they have is like super unique, even though, they do kind of look like deer. However, like the way their legs are shaped, how their tail is used for balance, and how they're just like a solid brick of muscle. Um, in their pouch, they have pouches, which is crazy, marsupial. Um, so they just have a lot of like really random features that were all like thrown together that work really well. Quite the creative look, that's for sure.
yeah. Russell, you got anything to say about marsupial kind of evolutionary history? Very
Um,
interesting topic that I don't know much about.
so I actually work on marsupials. That's technically my day job. Marsupials are they're very difficult to love at times. Um, the thing about the red kangaroos are basically the marsupial attempt to produce a morphotype that does well in open environments.
Mhm.
They do pretty well in a lot of ways, but I mean it's hard to say. I think part of the issue is that most of the big marsupials are all dead. The kangaroo is the largest just by process of elimination. Um, so it's like in North America, it's like how, in Eastern North America, the biggest mammal we have is a white-tailed deer, but that's not because bigger mammals don't exist. It's because humans hunted, all the elk and bison and moose to
In most
extirpation.
places in North America.
Right. So, but in Australia, they don't have that. So all the big like diprotodontoids and all the big kangaroos they're all wiped out.
Right.
And there's really
Um,
nothing other than the smaller ones that survive. Fun
yeah,
thing,
and marsupials just are very, very prevalent on these more isolated Gondwanan
right?
areas. South America did something similar. We had a bunch of marsupials in South America, or am I getting that
Yeah.
confused with
No, they're
with
marsupials.
Xenarthans? Okay.
I work on Sparassodonts, so
Okay.
that's the South American carnivorous marsupials. And some people will say, oh, they're technically metatherians. That's splitting hairs. They're like the immediate sister group to the crown, and basically for 90 years they were called marsupials, and calling them
Right.
stem metatherians ends up just confusing people half the time. But
Right. And they used
on
to be really dominant, except until the last, kind of the late Miocene and Pliocene, you get land bridges forming that allows.
Well,
Uh,
and that's not the case, it turns out. There's not very good evidence of any of these South American forms getting outcompeted by northern mammals. They just
okay.
kind of fall over and die on their own. They
Frankness.
taste terrible, kangaroos. They taste like absolutely terrible.
Unless you're a dog. Supposedly, dogs love kangaroo meat.
I'd imagine bodybuilders would too. It looks like extremely lean protein.
Yeah, but it tastes like styrofoam.
I think they're used to it when they eat unseasoned chicken and white
Yeah,
rice.
yeah. I don't think bodybuilders care. Australian bodybuilders get jacked on kangaroo meat.
I think I can put this at C tier. What do you guys think?
C's fair.
Maybe even lower. C's fine, but like
C or D maybe?
Russell's a
maybe,
marsupial guy. What do you think?
D.
maybe even F. Yeah, I mean
They're
just
not even the red kangaroo's not even the most fun of the kangaroos.
yeah, C's full. I mean, like, what else are we gonna put in F besides a kangaroo?
Not F. They're not F. They're
You thought D? So we still have
D.
room for one D.
I say let's put it in D.
Yeah, I think
For
that,
now.
yeah, they can be on the chopping block. Our next one's a saltwater crocodile. These predate on people.
Yeah.
Yeah, these crocodiles are just winners. They're just winners of animals. They're
Except for when the ice age happens and they lose like 60% of their diversity.
yeah, it sucks when that happens, but I think crocodiles have a good have a bright future ahead of them.
500 to 2,500 pounds. Live up to roughly 70 years. There are some exceptions of them getting much older. They can actually run at 15 to 18 miles per hour. Uh,
Uh-oh.
yeah, run, not swim, run. Um, and they can get 17 to 23 feet long.
Yeah, these things get massive. They're very dangerous. In Australia, these are something you have to watch out for.
Oh, in like Indonesia and like the
Yeah.
Philippines, they're prolific killers.
They
Yeah.
get really big in like the Philippines. There was one that was I'm trying to remember how big Lolong actually was.
Yeah, well, Long was 18 feet. I don't know. I know he was 18 feet. I don't know the exact poundage, but I think it was like maybe 1,800, 1,900. He wasn't quite a ton, but he was really close.
And you get a lot of anecdotal reports of these things getting much larger too.
Yeah, a lot of dude. It was up beside the boat. Must have been at least 30 feet. No, no, excuse me. It was right up beside the boat. Must have been at least 30 feet. Or hold on, 10 meters, 9 meters.
Yeah, and these are super versatile too. They, like the American crocodile, they're able to inhabit saltwater and as well as them being in freshwater environments.
Yeah.
So you have to watch out for them basically everywhere.
It's very cool that they can like. I mean, Nile crocs are like a very similar animal, but they've got all these giant African animals to subsist on. Well, these guys have to make do with like the less like megafauna dense regions that they inhabit, but they still get even bigger and even more aggressive.
Yeah, their
Yeah.
metabolisms are really fantastic, and they can go for like a really long time without food too, which probably helps.
Yeah, they have extremely strong bite forces and then those death rolls are just
The
so
strongest of any
brutal.
animal currently alive.
These to me would be an S tier animal. I
Yep, I
know
like
that,
S tier. I like S tier.
yeah.
Who are we gonna kick out of S tier then? Personally, I would put it at A tier, but I'm not sure who I would kick.
So A tiers are also filled.
Yeah.
So see now it's getting tough.
Yeah, I don't like lions being above crocs. I'm on team croc.
Mm.
Even though I do think lions probably should be an S tier. I don't know who else we'd kick besides maybe the blue whale.
No, I'm an advocate for the blue whale. I love the blue whale so much, and it's just like the largest that you can get in the modern day. I feel like that alone is enough to keep it up there. I think lion is fair.
I
We could
think we
probably
can drop the American alligator from A because
Yeah.
we have the croc,
Mm,
which
okay.
I think is just the superior animal, at
and then
least
we
for
could
this list purposes.
lion down to A and then saltwater up to S.
Would you guys be okay with moving the
Um,
line to
I
A?
I like that. Although I'm prepared. Like just depends on how we rank it. If we rank it in terms of how much I like them, Crocs and S. But in terms of like definitely the charisma part, I think Lion beats Croc.
Oh, that's true. If we're going more on, well, yeah,
I don't think we're doing that because again, we have Panda and F.
Yeah.
yeah, we're kind of just going based off favorite facts.
Yeah, but like pandas like how much charisma can you have if you have to be induced by the you have to be bribed by the zookeeper to
No,
to
actually,
to
I
reproduce?
think charisma is the only thing that they have. Like
Yeah,
every,
It
they're
is.
just charisma.
I think maybe either leaving lion in S or swapping it to A, I would be okay with either. I think as far as charisma goes, now that you mention it, it probably should be lion in S because even keeping saltwater croc at A, I think that's still fair. I don't think I would argue too much leaving an A. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think A
Yeah,
could still work
yeah,
begrudgingly.
yeah.
I,
Now that I've voiced how much I prefer Crocs to lions, I'm okay with it. But like, so long as our audience understands that I
Yeah,
still do
personal
think Crocs are
preference.
better.
so our next one is a southern cassowary.
Southern
I don't.
cassowaries are pretty cool, but I probably wouldn't put them up just as high on the list. But as a quick couple facts, we have their weight at 100 to 160 pounds. They stand at about 5 feet tall. They have a kick force of 160 pounds per square inch, and they have 5-inch long claws at the end of their feet. And they live to be about 20 years old.
Yep, these things have taken people out before. Actually, I think they put
In,
someone in the hospital. I'm not sure if they've taken somebody
I think
out
they
before.
have in Queensland. They have cassowary warnings the same way that like in Alaska they have like watch out for bears.
Yeah, I've heard that these things are menaces.
I've
Yeah.
heard that, but then I remember like looking it up and like, oh, actually, it's a relatively it's kind of like moose, where it's like, well, these things will mess you up, but actually,
Well, a lot
given
of
how
times
many,
it's the male birds that think their offspring is threatened.
Mm. Oh, do the males take care of the offspring?
Yeah, that's the way. I mean, that's the ancestral pattern in birds usually. It's either male care or biparental care.
Nice, good dads.
Apparently, it's the same way in Maniraptor and dinosaurs as well. We have some evidence, I want to say, of in troodontids of what they're suggesting is male parental care because it's a nest that's in the process of being laid, but the animal that's laying the eggs doesn't show signs of like medullary. I'm not entirely sure on this, so I could be
Yeah,
wrong.
I don't think we could possibly say that about. I mean, sexual dimorphism in dinosaurs is almost like a non, like it's not even a
Well,
question worth
it's not
asking because their
dimorphic. It's
populations are
it's
so
more of
low.
just being able to identify. I don't know. I don't
Or
remember
we're
the
like even
exact.
identifying the sex of like well, especially with something like troodontids, which have a famously horrible fossil record.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm maybe that's cool. If you can link me a study, that'd be awesome to read. But I'm a little skeptical. Okay, never mind. They have okay. I must have been thinking of something else because they have definitely off people before. Good dads and dangerous. I think that gets them more points, and they make really cool sounds.
Vericchio 2008 or Vericchio et al. 2008.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say that there's a few different species of the cassowaries. This is the one with the uh, double wattle on its neck over there. I think the northern one only has one, and then there's a smaller species of cassowary as well.
Cool color too.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
really cool
Very nice
colors.
color. Love that blue.
Very
I
pretty.
love blue animals.
yeah. I would still probably put in F tier. I mean, it just sounds like
It's not an F
it's a
tier. It's like
menacing
C
bird.
at least.
I was
Well,
thinking somewhere between that, maybe like D, maybe
so
E, probably D.
so what makes you think it's a C at least?
I mean, it's a large, aggressive bird. It's a very weird looking animal, bright colors. It's it has unusual vocalization patterns. Its dietary habits are very weird. This thing goes around eating fruits and dispersing the seeds. I mean, there's animals that do that, but like it's a well-known seed disperser in northern Australia.
Yeah, honestly, these things are pretty cool. Maybe not. I think cool. Stay out of F tier. Ever maybe and maybe even E tier. Anything beside that, we can. I'm comfortable with. But
So
I
it's
do agree that they are still really, really cool. However, are they cooler than some of the other animals that we've already ranked? That's the real question.
I'd drop. Let's put them in D tier.
D tier. We need to move something.
Oh, yeah, that is six. All right, drop giant squid.
The
Yeah,
warthog, yeah,
actually, yeah, that's good too.
yeah. Because I was gonna say the giant squid's a lot cooler than the cassowary.
Yeah, I would drop warthog down one, put the cassowary up, put the big birds with the ostrich, you know?
Yeah.
Would you agree, Russell?
You guys just want to
It's
drop
fine.
Warthog to F tier?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we're gonna have a hard time with this if we don't. So
We're
yeah,
making some sacrifices.
Hmm.
yeah, because we still have a couple icons left too. All right, so yeah, we have six there. Our next one's a spotted hyena, and I can't have this guy going super low.
That's an
No,
A
I
tier.
can agree. I can't either.
Like,
Definitely,
they're big carnivores, but they're also super interesting.
Yeah.
yeah. They
They're
have like
supposedly like the most intelligent of the carnivorans.
Oh, really?
Yeah, supposedly.
Fascinating.
they have a bad reputation just based off the Lion King movie, but outside of that, not fantastic representation. They are pretty amazing animals. They're great family units. They're super emotionally intelligent in that way. They're intelligent from like a hunting standpoint. They have lots of different strategies that they use. They're really cool. They weigh 90 to 120 pounds. They live to about 12 years old, have a bite force of just over 1,000 pounds per square inch, and they can run up to 40 miles per hour.
Yeah, and what's also interesting is there's something called a cave hyena that's now
Kind
extinct
of
that used to
crucial.
expand all the way into Eurasia, and those I believe are considered to be the same species as the spotted hyena.
Yeah,
No,
they're
they're
a sub.
not. They're I think they're a different genus.
No, Crocuta spelaea. You might
Oh,
be
okay.
thinking of the percocutids.
I'm thinking of Dinocrucia, which
No, I think that's. I don't know if that is a because there's
oh,
there's
late
a group of
Miocene. Never mind. Yeah, okay,
yeah there's
never
a group
mind.
of false
I'm
hyenas
way
as
off.
well.
But I think the cave hyena is a spotted
Okay,
hyena
that checks out. Yeah, same as
subspecies.
the lion. And we have cave art of them. We have cave art of the cave lions too, but a lot
Yeah.
of cave art of those two things. I'm always really surprised by like mammoth is extremely rare in cave art. Not extremely, but like one
Not
of the
not
least common animals, which is strange. It's probably because not the Magdalenian. What's the culture that predated the Magdalenian? Anybody here know?
the one that predated. Let's see. That would have been. Now I'm drawing a blank too.
Uh, the
Um,
Gravettian, the Gravettian peoples, the Org nations in Grenada, Org nations, the Org nations. That's what I'm thinking of. A little bit of the Gravettians. They didn't actually predate upon mammoths that much, not as much as it looks like Neanderthals did. But anyways, that's way off topic. Hyenas, they're great. The females have penises, pseudo penises. It's
Oh yeah, I
fun.
yep.
forgot about that.
Yep.
They usually live in more female-dominated societies, and usually their hierarchy actually goes like um, from like the mother of like the strongest, most dominant hyena is the one in charge, and then whatever her daughter is like next in command, and so on and so forth. Eventually, like they can compete. Once their competition kind of rises up within the group, there are other females that will try to take charge, but typically, um, it's hierarchy as far as like a kingdom would go, where there's like the queen, you get the princess, and eventually the princess becomes the queen, and so on and so forth. But
You
they're
we love our feminist, hyper intelligent
yeah,
carnivores.
definitely very interesting society.
I mean, they've got really high bite force and a really, really high capability of breaking bone. It's
Yeah,
fun.
they speak for themselves for how awesome they are.
Yeah. And the spotted ones are the ones that laugh, right?
Yeah, they have a
Hmm.
very like the laughter is actually their equivalent of language, and there's different variations of it that mean different words and different things.
Yeah.
Like I'm not sure if it's not as complex as like dolphins, but like there's a lot of actual information being conveyed.
Hmm.
Yeah, these to me would be an A or S tier.
I wouldn't put it all the way up to S personally, even though I do love
Maybe
them.
B tier.
I would say probably A tier.
Be prepared.
And what do you think, Russell?
A is fine.
A? So what should we kick
How
out
about how
for it?
about how about B for be prepared?
And swap them out for capybaras.
Yeah, that's good.
What
I
about the
like that.
bison?
No, I like the bison where they're at for now.
Yeah, me too.
All right, so our C is filled, so are we going to bring the capybara down to the next open
E.
slot is E?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Do we think capybara deserves that demotion?
So
It de
sad.
de deserves got nothing to do with it. It's just a stack list.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you guys all think down to E for capybara.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sad. All right. So the next one's a swordfish. What do we think of
Swordfish.
this?
Great
Sword.
candidate. Great candidate for the underrated animals tier list.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well,
I
I figured I wanted one bony fish because I feel like bony fish don't really get any representation. And when I think of like marine fishermen, the swordfish tends to be like the icon for
Yeah.
them.
They're awesome. They're so big, they're so fast. Everything about them is so cool. But like, I don't know. It seems like a bad fit for this list.
I would put them probably a little lower, I think, as well. They get to about 10 feet long on average, but some can get longer. They swim at about 60 to 70 miles per hour, which is super impressive. They get to about 50 to 200 pounds, live about 9 years, and supposedly they are delicious.
Oh yeah, swordfish is awesome. I've had swordfish. Yeah, but it's a very common like like if you're in a coastal seafood restaurant, it's a very common menu item. Tastes great.
Yeah.
So I guess it is iconic, but not really in the same way that like a
It's like
lion
the
is
bald
iconic.
eagle. It's only really iconic to a subgroup of people, which would be, coastal people, sport fishermen, that kind of thing,
Hmm.
Mhm.
versus like just iconic in general. Most people don't think about fish, and if they do, they only think of like
Shark.
goldfish. Like I had
Yeah.
to deal with this firsthand with my research, where everyone was claiming that, oh, it looks like a goldfish. It's like it looks like a generic bony fish. I mean, there's a lot. It looks like any one of these relatively deep-bodied things. I think it's just that goldfish are the standard point of reference for people talking about anything that's not a shark.
So where are we thinking would go on the list?
E tier.
E?
Yeah,
E, and then prepare to put it in F.
Even though I would say this is a super impressive animal is in terms of like speed and how awesome it looks and the fact that it has sword in the name, I would probably put it down
Yeah.
lower too.
Yeah, and underrated. If we do an underrated tier list, that thing's going on it.
Hmm.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
I just wanted some representation for the bony fish, but nobody cares about them.
Well,
no,
Honorable,
maybe that means something.
The
honorable
tiger
mention.
is one that people really do care about.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
I think of the tiger, I think of Rocky 3.
When I think of tiger, I'm actually covered in tiger stuff around me right now. My family are full of LSU fans, and they just lost to Bama, which bad react in the chat, please. But I'm looking at a bunch of tiger crap around me right now.
Yeah, tigers usually live about 10 to 15 years, weigh 350 to 500 pounds, have a bite force of about 1,000 pounds per square inch, roughly the same as a hyena, surprisingly. They can run 30 to 40 miles per hour and have 3-inch long teeth.
From like a predator perspective, tigers are more impressive than lions in terms of like
Yeah.
they take more impressive prey usually, and they do it alone.
they are the only animals that naturally prey on brown bears. And even so, they don't do it regularly, but the fact that they do it at all is kind of
Yeah.
noteworthy.
Yeah,
Hmm.
they take adult crocs, which is something the lions don't do. They take elephants sometimes by themselves. They take rhinos by themselves.
And they actively hunt people sometimes too, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like
I would put them.
let me check how many people it
Yep.
is.
Do that. They roar like all the stock lion sound effect roar is almost always a tiger.
The Champawat tigress may have killed any up to 400 people before finally being killed in 1907.
Ooh.
Wow.
In like the Siberian part of Russia, there is a saying that's basically do not mess with a tiger because they will remember it and they will track you down to your house and they will make your life miserable. Like they will
Or
go into your house and
they'll
attack
eat
you.
you. Yeah. They won't make your life miserable. They will make it very short.
Oh
Yeah.
no, like there is a story in National Geographic where like the tiger actively messed with this guy for a couple weeks before it decided to actually, just go for the kill.
Wow. Interesting.
I mean, it is a cat. It is also one of the most majestic, if not the most majestic animal of all time, at least that we know of alive today.
Right.
I would go so far as to say this is one of the S tier animals.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I mean, like the tiger is to like Eastern civilizations what the lion is to Western ones.
And these are the largest of the extant big cats, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So what's interesting is it used to be the Siberian tigers are the largest, and they were historically, but these animals have been hunted by humans so much that the Bengal tigers actually slightly surpass the Siberians now in terms of general size.
I
Yeah.
think Siberians are like bigger on average, but the biggest are still Bengals because they've got a much higher sample size to get big guys out of.
Well, there's barely any Siberians
Yeah,
left.
there's a couple hundred maybe.
What's on our S tier right now that we would all feel comfortable kicking? Anything?
We're about to have a huge cascade going on right now.
I'd say Komodo.
The Komodo.
Yeah.
So what are we gonna move the Komodo
Yeah, I
to?
think Komodo.
I think Komodo down and then
Bald eagle
probably
down lower.
Eagle, yeah.
So we have our B tier filled, we have our C tier filled, we have our D tier filled. So we're gonna have to bring some
Man, okay,
stuff.
okay. Drop manta ray. Drop Komodo to A. Drop eagle to B. Drop manta ray to C. Drop penguin to D.
Wait, so
Drop.
Komodo to A, you're thinking?
Yep.
Would everyone agree with Komodo to A? Would that be
Yeah,
fine?
if we have to remove it from S tier, that's where I'd put it.
All right.
Yeah.
And then what in A? The bald eagle?
Yeah.
Yeah, bald eagle down to B, and then manta down to C, and then penguin down to D.
Or cobra. We could do cobra. Or what about sea lion?
I
Uh,
think, yeah, sea lion. Would you guys agree with sea lion?
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah, I'm okay with that.
And then I'm thinking sea turtle on D.
Anaconda. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So sea turtle goes to E,
Yeah.
Yep.
and then our tiger goes to S. Our next animal is the walrus.
So I looked into the walrus. It's cool. They've got a very extensive fossil record with only the most modern animals having tusks. The current species is the only extant animal from a lineage that's got a pretty I think reaching back to the Oligocene
No, it'd be
radiation.
Miocene because there's not
Well,
many pinnipeds in the Oligocene period.
I think it's like latest Oligocene. It's like 25 million years old. And the Miocene starts 20, right?
Miocene's 23.
Okay, yeah. So I think maybe the very end of the Oligocene is when the divergence between the walrus group and the other ones happened. But so they've got tusks, which is an elongation of their canines. They've got these enormous noses with whiskers that they use because they eat benthic animals. They hunt fish too, but like most of their diet is benthic stuff.
A lot
They
of
root around
suction.
in the sand. Yep, they root around in the sand. They crack it open with their teeth and then they suck it out by kind of creating a vacuum seal over the animal over the poor mollusk with their huge lips. They use their tusks primarily. The males fight with them, of course, and they even use it for defense against polar bears. But both males and females have them because they use them for opening up holes in the ice to breathe through. They've been known to like while they primarily eat benthic animals, a study found that of most of the walruses that they observed gut contents for, most of them had small amounts of seal in their diets, and some have even been seen with narwhals flesh in their stomachs. Which so they're I don't want to think about the mechanics of a walrus killing a narwhal. That sounds like a horrific incident to
I
witness,
think
but
they've been seen actually fighting narwhals.
just straight up jousting.
It's a really old book I remember seeing
Saber.
it in.
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah.
That's what I would want to see. Walrus can get up to about 2,200 pounds.
They're,
They
they're,
have a
they're the third largest. They're the third largest pinniped after both the elephant seal species.
Yep. They have a bite force of around 1,850 pounds per square inch. Their tusks can usually get up to about 30 inches long. They are not super fast swimmers, about 5 to 20 miles per hour. But their blubber can get 4 to 6 inches thick, and they can live to be about 40 years old.
Where do we think that we would rate these?
I'm thinking C tier.
Yeah,
So if that was at C, we would have to kick out something here. I'm thinking the moose.
I was thinking Cobra.
man, both those sound like things that could be kicked out.
You
Honestly,
know,
let's move both of them down because we're going to end up moving them anyway later.
yeah. So we
Yeah,
have room in one spot for E, and we have 3 spots for F left.
Well,
So
we put walrus as an F tier.
as an F,
I mean, what else are we gonna put in F?
would you guys be okay with an F tier walrus?
yeah. They're kind of in the same boat as the panda and the cheetah. That they're kind of like the last of their lineage, and they're probably not going to do very well in the future because they're just so specialized. They're not like panda level specialized, but like the future doesn't look very good for them.
Hmm.
I would probably even put sea turtles down one more to F as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, we can move that to
even
F.
animals with the dim futures.
I mean, honestly, like we're in a point in Earth history where there's a lot of endlings running around and
Yeah,
not a lot of good idea of what's coming up to
very
replace them.
sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think sea lions boast the kind of the sea lion and sea lion-esque animals
Yeah.
have a pretty bright future.
I think honestly, I'm very surprised with this, just how diverse mongooses and African murids are. Suggests that there's like if you had a meteor hit today, those two would probably be first in line for an adaptive radiation because they're just already in the middle of one, basically.
Rats, yeah, rats, pigeons.
Yeah, see, I think that rodents, birds, and domesticated cats, I think that cats are so generalist and adaptable that they would really take on if humans just like went bye-bye. So we
Well,
have the Western gorilla.
this should have been one of the first animals we talked about, honestly, because it would have immediately gone up pretty high. They weigh about 300 to 450 pounds, can stand about 6 feet tall. They have a bite force of 1,300 pounds per square inch, can run up to 25 miles per hour, and live 35 to 40 years.
So they have the ability to digest food much or herbivorous food much better than we do, right? And that's how they're able to be so lean.
Yeah, they have fantastic digestive systems. Not only that, but the amount of food that they eat and what they eat is really impressive because they eat really like smaller things. They're not really taking on big prey. They eat like bugs and leaves. They don't really hunt like big stuff ever. They're a lot more scavengers than anything else, which means that they're not using as much energy in general outside of like fighting off a jaguar or fighting each other. So for the most bit, they're just kind of hanging out, which helps them to conserve a lot more and focus more on like their internal functions, like digesting food.
Yeah, I mean the I mean as like even though gorillas are kind of like this epitome of like what great strength would look like in a primate, they don't like they get preyed upon by leopards, which are not a particularly impressive big cat all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They're not they're kind of still very much victims of predation way more than they are like
And how is their
strong
temperament?
animals.
How is their
Oh,
temperament compared to chimps?
they're about the only primates that actually have a decent temperament, and I'm including humans in that.
Yeah, as far as like just raw aggression goes, they're usually pretty chill.
They're
Yeah,
very,
and most of it's
yeah.
males during mating season.
Exactly. Exactly. Always exceptions to
And
the
you know,
rule.
if a 2-year-old falls under their enclosure,
Or Harambe?
You know, on the
that's
list.
that's what I was referencing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If
I
you
saw a
live
bunch
on
of
in our
gorillas one
hearts.
time. Yeah, they were. I saw the gorillas at the zoo playing a very fun game called "Try Not to Get Quick Scoped by the Zookeeper." Those are Harambe joke.
You know, one of my childhood experiences that I'll never forget was I was like 3 or 4 in the Bronx Zoo and I saw the gorilla enclosure and I watched this animal just poop, take its hand, like grab it, look at it like it was investigating, and then just started eating it.
Oh yeah, they
And
do that in captivity when they're not doing very well. That's one reason. Like the Cleveland Zoo has this whole thing where they're trying to get them to eat more naturalistic diets because the problem is these zoos will give them like commercial designed gorilla feed, which isn't very good for them, and like the keepers will do things like sneak them ice cream sandwiches because they're giving us such puppy dog eyes, you know,
mhm,
like we like they want their treat. It's like yeah, but like people will love to eat things that just aren't very good for them.
yeah.
Um, it turns out if you actually feed them like a diet of leafy greens, they'll stop eating their own poop. But then their poop turns green, but apparently that's natural. Yeah, so like when they switched the diets out at the zoo for the gorillas and they it was a more natural diet and the poop turned green, the zookeepers freaked out because obviously the poop's green, must be something wrong. So they called up this gorilla biologist in Africa and the gorilla biologist said, "No, no, no, that's normal. That's actually probably a sign that
That's how it's
they're
supposed to be. Yeah,
better now than what they were doing before."
yeah. Given how many people can't diet, given how many people are lactose intolerant, I can't even imagine what an ice cream sandwich would do to a gorilla's
Well,
digestive system.
gorillas are almost certainly lactose intolerant.
Yeah, I can't imagine how much damage an ice cream sandwich would wreak on on a gorilla's digestive system.
I would
Yeah.
put gorillas at A tier and bump wolves down to B tier.
You would put them where?
A.
A?
And I'd bump wolves down to
No,
D.
that's not fair. I maybe bears, maybe the brown bear.
Yeah.
One of the bears out of A.
So the bear, where would we think it would go?
Maybe down to C. I don't want to bump him too low.
You know, I'm thinking we'll move the sea lion down to E because I don't think
Yeah,
it's necessary in D. What do we think about that?
that's good.
All right, so that's 4, 5. And I'm thinking we bump down one other thing to E as well to just fill up the bottom.
How about the anaconda
Anaconda. Yeah, I don't like
or the
snakes.
kangaroo? Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Well, this is
That's fine.
nobody who really cares about the anaconda. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the anaconda, but I'm okay with it because I'm outvoted.
All right, so then that leaves us with an animal. So we have some room in D that we can bring stuff down.
I would put probably cobra and moose down to D. And then
I think that's fair. What do you guys think? Cobra and moose? D?
Yeah.
So now that we have this, I'm thinking the bison can go to C. Would we agree with that?
Well, I
with a
mean,
head.
we just need to move the bear out, right?
The bear out of A. And I was thinking
Yeah.
we'd bring the bear to B and the bison to C.
Yeah.
Russell, would you agree with that?
Hang on, move which to bison to C and then
Yep.
bear. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
All right, what's up next? Whale
The
shark.
whale shark. This one's gonna be so tough putting in a lower tier. This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
this is the largest non-tetrapod that's alive today. These things, the largest reported one is around 60 feet long. These are erectolobiforms, so they're a carpet shark, and they're filter feeders. So they have very minute teeth that have shrunk down, and they have very large gaping mouths. Like we said with a manta ray, it is advantageous for filter feeders to get larger sizes. And outside of that, they're just majestic animals.
Whale sharks live 80 to 130 years. They can get over 18 to 30 feet in length. They are the largest one we ever found though was over 60 feet, but they're really slow. They only move at 3 miles per hour.
Yeah, there are reports of larger whale sharks, but like
Yeah.
not confident. Like I think there's like a 70 to 80 foot reported, but
Yeah.
that's using the boat as a measurement, I think.
There's massive reports. The largest documented one in the scientific literature is around a little over 60 feet.
Right.
Yeah, these would be really tough for me to put low.
Yeah, I think we should carve out some stuff in like A or B tier maybe. They're
Yeah.
sharks. They're sharks. We'll talk more about them in a future episode.
Yeah. So we have room to demote one B tier into C.
Bear.
Bear.
But
Yeah.
actually put whale shark in C.
I'm thinking B tier for the whale shark and then C for
Maybe
the
hyenas. Maybe hyena and C.
Oh, but I love hyenas.
I like hyenas a lot too. I
No, I
honestly
think hyenas
hyenas
need to
are a
be
good
pretty high.
underrated animal.
Yeah,
I think bear is fine because we have polar bear in A.
yeah,
Maybe alligator down too.
We can do alligator. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel
that's
like
fair.
bear above alligator.
I'd
Yeah.
almost put alligator in D. I mean, they're interesting, but like they don't do much that a croc doesn't do
Yeah.
already, aside from tolerate cold well.
Yeah. And be carried around by Floridians.
Yeah.
Yeah, used by Floridians to guard their drug stashes in their pools in their backyard.
All right, last
All right.
one.
Yep. So our last one's the white rhinoceros.
Strong end. What a finale. White rhinoceros can stand about 5 to 6 feet tall. They can weigh 3,500 pounds, run at 31 miles per hour. They have 2 horns. The one in the front can be about 40 to 80 inches long, and then the one in the back, the rear horn, can be usually about 22 inches, and they live about 40 to 50 years.
Yeah, and they're wide-lipped. I think they're the only surviving wide-lipped rhinos, and they're grazers instead of browsers, which is a fun niche partitioning fact.
Yeah, they to me really look like an Ice Age holdover animal.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, like these kind of perissodactyls used to be a lot more prevalent in ecosystems, and the Oligocene and the Eocene are no longer.
So what do we think on the white rhino?
I'm thinking C tier.
C tier.
Any arguments for C tier?
C
Nope.
tier's fine.
We'll have to move something to F tier. What are we thinking to go to F?
Giraffe probably down to F.
Yeah, giraffe.
What about ostrich?
Ostrich can take the place at E.
So giraffe to F.
Giraffe to F, and then
Yeah.
ostrich to E.
Okay, and then that leaves room for 1D tier penguin.
Yeah, that's good.
And then rhino at C. All right.
There we go. That is our tier list.
Cool.
Now, if anyone watched all multiple hours of all of this, please like, comment, subscribe for all of our intensive labor when creating this. But yeah, this was a great talk. Thank you guys for coming on.